To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everybody. I'm going to ask for approval of the meeting agenda. I just want to point something out. This afternoon, the agenda was modified. An item was added. It's now item 1, 2, 3. It's the fourth item under discussion items. It's to take up a consideration of a change to policy E004 graduation requirements. This will be the first read. Ms. O'Neill from Policy Governance will present the item together. She'll be assisted by other people. So just so you're aware of that, it's a little bit of a change. I understand the documents are posted and then copies are outside. With that, can I have a motion to accept the agenda? To accept the agenda. Yeah, point of order. Yes.
I think if the item was added today, if it was within the 24-hour window, we really should vote by 2/3 to add that into the agenda.
Okay.
So I would make a motion to add that into the agenda, just so we're second that.
I think we're going to have a vote when we find out for 2/3, right? Yeah, okay. So with that, can I have a motion to put the agenda as amended? Is that your motion?
There's a motion.
That's what I'm saying. I think we
seconded. On that motion.
Yeah, I think we already have it on our agenda. That's my
What
point.
I'm saying is, if it was added this afternoon, it's outside of the 24-hour window.
Okay, that's fine. Can I have a vote on? I'm going to call the vote. That heard a second?
Yes.
Okay. All those in favor of Ms. Erickson's motion, signify by saying aye. 8-0. Now, can I have a motion to accept the agenda as amended? Second. All those in favor? 8-0. With that, we have our first item, Greenwich Alternative High School program review. I guess we could quite cast Ms. Ford, Dr. Winters, and Ms. Anfa. We need a chair.
No.
Oh, yeah. Are we missing one? No. Ms. Anfa, it's nice to see you. Thank you for coming. We always like to hear about your program.
Good evening. Thank you very much for having us. I'm going to start and then quickly kick this over to the people who've been really doing the work on this. When we came to the board last June and proposed doing this redesign of the alternative high school, one of the main questions to us was, please put this in context for us so that we understand sort of the bigger picture of Greenwich High School, how the programs and services fit together. I've made an attempt to do that for you. It won't be perfect, but it's meant to give you a general idea. On this first slide, I'll start from the bottom and move my way up because our general education program, we try to meet the needs of all students through different levels of classes, helping them get to the right fit of class. We have academic learning centers that are both a drop-in model as well as students are assigned to them. Those are available to all students whenever they are either assigned or have an open block. And we have response intervention, which is our policy, either through general education teachers or house-based PRT. They identify students with particular needs and they provide interventions for them, mainly in the general education setting. We also have some services that we would describe as services for some students. They are open to all, but not all students partake of these services, so that's how we distinguish these. The Stand By Me program is a program for 9th graders. It involves peer mentoring, tutoring. Every 9th grader identified for this program is assigned an 11th or 12th grader, and they spend one block a cycle with homework help and tutoring. We have a full range of SPED services. You know those from the least restrictive environment being the house-based resource room, to programs for students with severe disabilities, to the Community Connections, which is our 18 to 21-year-old program. Effective School Solutions may not be as known to the board. It's new this year. It is two clinical social workers who provide wraparound services for students, a very small number of students who are having challenging issues getting to school and staying in school. And finally, STARS is a Tier 2 in the RTI world, a Tier 2 type intervention, mainly for academic and executive functioning support. Students could be assigned there anywhere from usually 3 blocks per cycle, and that placement is made from the house PRT, the pupil review team. Which brings me to the programs as opposed to services that support some students. Again, all students could apply for any of these programs, but they don't serve all students. AVID, as you know, is the first generation college-bound students. They apply through middle school and are accepted in 9th grade and stay with their teacher for 4 years. The Comprehensive Support Program is based at Greenwich High School in the D Wing. It is a therapeutic program for students with relatively significant social emotional challenges. Students can take a hybrid of either all their academic classes in CSP or a mix between CSP environments and Greater Greenwich High School. Innovation Lab, as you know, serves students currently in 10th and 11th grade, next year 10th, 11th, and 12th. And the main difference there is that it provides an alternative structure so that we can provide personalized learning to the best degree that we can. And then finally today you'll be hearing about the Windrose program, which formerly known as the Alternative High School, but is renamed, repurposed. We know you've read you've had the opportunity to read the report. I would just like to say that this team has worked incredibly hard to get to this point, and I know Ms. Ample would like to introduce the other members of the team as well. Of course, we look for your feedback on this and hope to learn and to continuously improve this program going forward.
Hi. So I'm going to actually just ask our research team to stand up. So we have Tony Mullen, who is a special ed teacher at the Alternative High School, Anita Perot, who is a math teacher at the Alternative High School, Brian Keating, who has many hats. He is an English teacher and an assistant dean, and Jennifer Benoit, who runs a comprehensive support program at the high school.
Thanks for taking on this project.
We can sit down.
Tony, if you want to stand the whole time, that's all good.
We just test your influence. Okay. So again, I know that you guys have had a chance to look at our document, and we wanted to take a few moments just to highlight some things for you. As you know, when we met in June, the number of recommendations made to the Alternative High School and our enrollment had been declining. These and other factors had prompted us a need to redesign our current program. Through the redesign, we identified a population of students who were not graduating with their cohort or who were at risk for not graduating at all. We then gathered some information to determine the academic and social emotional supports that this group of students needed. We looked at what supports were currently available through the high school and then determined what additional supports were needed to address their needs. To identify the need, we researched from Aspen data in October and March, the number of students who were under credit. We collected students about which students had GPAs under 1.5. Then we also reviewed survey data collected in September from the student body, and the number whose responses indicated that they lacked connection to school, had difficulty finding purpose, and wanted a stronger link between academics and college and career.
I'm sorry, so say that again. You're saying that
So
the identification in your work was to these students.
right, so we first
Did
had...
you wind up focusing on this group?
we focused on a portion of this group. But in our numbers, we looked at all the kids who were overage and under credit, who had a GPA under 1.5, and who answered the survey that they lacked connection, had difficulty finding purpose, and wanted a stronger link between the academics, college, or career. Again, through the data analysis, surveys, and research on best practices, we determined that the redesigned alternative high school was necessary. In our first year, we're going to help focus at the most at-risk students to reset the course toward graduation with credit attainment, increased motivation for learning, and a connection and a purpose for learning. Therefore, we designed the Windrose program in order to support the needs and address the barriers we have identified. We feel the plan will be most beneficial to the identified at-risk student population, and after a year, this is all of the things that we have done, we had considered. Our primary objective was to help this targeted group of students graduate ready for college and career, ready for each path that they chose to pursue after graduation. The redesigned program focus on the three main areas are aligned with the vision of the graduate. The academic capacity building is focused on the credit attainment. Interpersonal capacity building is focused on engagement and making connections in school and our community. The personal capacity building is focused on realizing a purpose for learning. Then the course activities and strategies presented through the document fall into our four main categories representing the pillars of our program: personalizing the learning experience, building social emotional learning skills, providing real-world connection between academics and career internships, and recovering credits in a timely manner. As we stated, our primary goal for the targeted population of students is to graduate ready for college and career. In order to do this, 100% of these students must earn at least 6 credits each year. And the following strategic objectives will serve as our success measures to track the progress as we make towards our goal. And in the document, all of the objectives were all laid out for their SMART language and how we're going to measure. We recognize that given the history of some of the students, the SMART goal may have to be adjusted to create a more realistic and achievable goal for each student. And we have a system built in that each month the Windrose staff will evaluate the progress towards the goals by evaluating our strategic objectives. Stemming from the 4 pillars, the program elements, we have redesigned the focus of the personalized planning for each student's success, the incorporation of college and career awareness and exploration, and a more rapid and healthy rate of credit attainment to ensure a prompt graduation. With this redesign, the Windrose program will reset the course to graduation for at-risk students, contribute to the GPS capacity of helping the students meet the vision of the graduate, and set a course to better align career pathways and academics. And the R&D team welcomes any feedback that you have.
Is there any more you wanted to present or talk about before we throw it open to question?
Will we get a copy of the slides?
That's from the.
No, I know it's in here, but it's in
It wasn't a Word document.
yeah.
It will be posted.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I guess I should have said soft copy. Soft is electronic.
Electronic, software instead of hardware. Okay, with that, I think I saw Jennifer first. Ms. Dayton.
Thank you very much for the overview. I'm trying to figure out how the pieces fit together from other programs the high school is running. I noted the low performance as one criteria with GPA. I noted another aspect of the program is emotional regulation. So I'm trying to figure out if there's any overlap with CSP or effective school solutions are those the same target population or totally different? I'm trying to figure out the profile of the person at the alternative high school and what it will take to make them successful.
Rose, if I could, I think others are going to have, I certainly have that question, I think others are going to have that question. It might be helpful, just so people can follow along. I think people might not be clear with all the distinctions of programs we have now, programs we've had historically. Arch, CSP is referenced in here, alternative high school. It might be helpful just to set the landscape before you answer Ms. Dayton's question. So everybody's on the same sheet of music.
I think also understanding the programs that it seems to be replacing, do we feel like all of those students who met those criteria, how are they going to fit into the new overall plan?
Yeah, I think that's a different question, but let's get that one too. We're going to need that one too. Maybe we can just set the landscape for it. That would be really helpful.
I can start. When I first got here 20 years ago, there were two off-site programs, CLP, the Community Learning Program, and ARCH. CLP was only for students in general education. They did not provide any special education services, and ARCH was only for students with special education needs, no general education students. But if you looked at the students in general, they had very similar profiles. A lot of what we're talking about here, kids who were disconnected, kids who had a history of failure, other issues also, you'd find a higher percentage of kids with involvement with the law, drugs, other concomitant kind of risk factors. Those two programs existed separately for years, moving around this town as space became available. We've been all over the place. At some point, we all got together, I think it was probably about when Christopher, and we said, these guys are swimming in the same pond, and they're swimming in two different ponds, but they look an awful lot like the same fish. So why do we have two separate programs? And we put them cohabitated in the same location. That was our first step. And they lived together at St. Catherine's in two different hallways. And then we started bringing them together so that kids who were in the ARCH program could benefit from some of the higher level academic courses, and kids who were in the CLP program could benefit from the higher level of social emotional supports that were associated with ARCH. And then they kind of crossed the hallway and became one program. But what was happening was we were seeing the most at-risk students together in an offsite.
When that occurred, was the program renamed, and what was it renamed to?
Yes, that was CLP, and ARCH became GAHS, the Greenwich Alternative High School. Unfortunately, at some point, the student bodies started becoming much more externally acting out, and was developing a reputation of being a place where bad kids were sent and bad things were happening. And it started getting a reputation that we couldn't break. Kids who really needed to be off campus, who really need to benefit from some other kind of education, were not going there because of the reputation, and the kids who were going there were just feeding the reputation. So the decision was made at the superintendent's level, at the school level, at the high school level, that we needed to take a step back and relook at the program and see if we could rebrand the program to keep some of the very important components of it. And for many kids, that's being off-site. We've all been to the high school, and you see how big it is and how challenging it is. So the off-site nature is very important. The low student-to-faculty relationship ratio is very important, because these are kids who desperately need a very strong relationship with a competent adult. And we need to make sure that they have access to higher level academics if they need it, and remedial academics if they don't. And then the last piece that I think Winrose is trying to bring in is that connection between what you do now and what you want to do later. So that while chemistry may stink, it may get you to a really great job, and here are the kind of jobs that it can get you to. And for a lot of kids, they don't see that connection, either because of their home situations or whatever. So it's making that real strong connection between what you do now does impact later on, opens up more doors, gives you more options.
So Rose, is the proposal that Winrose would replace Greenwich Alternative High School in its entirety?
Yes.
Okay, and there wouldn't be a request for another program? Fine. that landscape helps, and now we're all on the same sheet of music what we're talking about.
I'm not sure the question was answered.
Well, no, her question still needs to be answered.
I just want to add one more thing to Mary's excellent history, and then I think Ro can describe the kind of student that we're talking about. That this team took an approach early on, which was the decline in enrollment was not just a function of the students who were there and the reputation that it created, but perhaps it was programmatically driven as well, that maybe we weren't offering the right kind of program that would attract students and retain students and give students what they needed. This dovetailed nicely with the district strategic plan, the focus on personalized learning, because we said if ever a group that needs a very personalized approach to learning, this is it. How can we make that happen? How can we make them feel connected to what they're learning and where they're going? So that was an important part of their conversation.
Can we go back to Ms. Dayton's questions? I'm not sure we tackled it.
I need to understand what kind of mental health support is needed for this population, whether that's built into the program. No, it's not. I need to know the profile of the student. We talked about emotional regulation, we talked about truancy. Oftentimes, mental health issues go alongside with that. I also need to understand more of the reasoning for the low performance. We see the effects of it are truancy, but that's not the cause. So we need to really target the programming to the individuals. And I'm trying to understand, part of the population is special needs, right? Part of the population could be troubled youth, mental health issues going on, family life issues going on. I understand how you're trying to connect them to the school, but what would be the typical profile of this person?
Okay, so the typical profile of a student would be they're overage, under credit, so they may in theory be in 11th grade, but maybe their grade is graduating. Their original cohort is graduating. They are disconnected. They are just going by in classes. Maybe they're doing the work. Maybe they're not. They don't have a connection to the staff that's there. It's different if I have a connection to you and I ask you to do something versus somebody who doesn't. There's a disappointment, and they don't do it for me, there's a disappointment there. These kids, they don't see a purpose to what they're learning. So why am I doing this experiment? It doesn't impact me. I may not be going to college. I don't need to do any of this. Those are some of the qualities we'll see, where they just go through, like maybe they're apathetic at school, and what we want to do is really have them see a purpose to what they're learning. And that's why we set out, we're going to do the SEL course every day, and we're going to align it to careers and academics. We're going to have an internship piece where we're going to, again, align it to what they're doing in the classroom. We're going to use the forensics course that we're offering to align it to all different career fields, not just police science. And so we've really, throughout their day, embedded different ways to connect the students.
Okay, just for orderliness, Mr. Bernstein, is your question
I'm
on?
going to go back and ask her so that I can ask mine.
Okay,
Yeah.
hold on, is this question on this topic?
Well, I want to go back to where we started because I'm
Okay.
still having an issue with how does this compare to the other programs?
Okay, let's
Right.
deal with that one, and then I'm going to go over here to Dr. Francis because she had a question. So why don't we, Mr. Bernstein?
You showed the other programs, we know the names of some of them. It would be helpful to understand how these programs differ in the types of students that they're focused on. And then you mentioned having a profile of the student. What is the size of the potential population you're trying to reach? Because I know you're targeting about 25 students for next year, but my guess is the population is much wider. And the other thing I think I want some clarity on is this is a voluntary program. The kids come in and out. So if we could take them in that order, I think.
Okay, so the Comprehensive Support Program is a program based at the high school in the D wing for kids who have more significant social and emotional needs. Their setting, the way they have a level system where they assign points to the kids, and based on the level system, they get to do certain things. Most of the kids take classes in the mainstream, and depending on the kid, a kid could be fully mainstreamed and only resource room if they're transitioning out into like a resource room setting or another setting. Or you could have a kid who's come into the program and most of their day is in CSP. The staff is there. They have two mental health staff members for the amount of students that they have. and they work with the students. They do a lot of, they work with the students on a lot of the behavior, analyzing, processing what happened, so that they're appropriate in the mainstream environment. And then, sorry.
Just want to add, roughly 80% of the students in CSP have IEPs. 5 of the 6 teachers are special education teachers. And the ratio of student to teacher is very small, with resource room support as well as significant emotional, mental health work.
But just for clarity, CSP is totally different from what we're talking about with Windrose, right?
Yes.
You're just describing this for purposes of context. Yes. He did, I know, I got the same question. Anyway, keep going. I'm sorry, Ro, go ahead.
Yeah, those kids can be at the high school. They can physically
right.
be
They
at
can
the high school.
function.
That seems to be the biggest difference. It's the premise, the location of
Dust
this.
in the wind?
That maybe has to get stated more. They might be.
They might have similar needs and similar approaches to the way their needs are being met, but it's at a location that's physically separate. So is that, like, would you say, the #1 difference to some of the other programs?
Hold on just a sec. I think he had 2 other questions.
I did.
I want to, I don't mean to cut it off, I just want to do this in an orderly way.
I do want to come back to that.
Oh, okay, can we deal with, do we need to deal with the questions you
Yeah,
already
let's
asked?
do the other question. So I see you're targeting 25 students based on the staffing allocation you have here. What is the size of the potential population? And again, describe the voluntary nature of the program.
So if we go back, I don't know if you can go back to that slide that had the 4 different categories. There was 151 students that fell into one of those 4 one or more of those 4 categories. So from there, we are targeting the overage and undercredit population.
Are any of the,
Say that again.
So, okay, so there's 151 students as of March that fell into one of these 4 one or more of these 4 categories.
are any of those students currently in the program or have been in and out of the program?
Yes.
How many?
Somewhere between 8 and 15.
And can you talk about the voluntary nature? Because I do understand kids come in and out of the program with regularity.
So what we would like to do is that we want, as part of the program, kids to commit to at least a semester. Anytime a kid goes back and forth between our school and the high school, especially mid-quarter, it presents a problem, especially for kids getting the classes. So we want the kids to commit to at least a semester, ideally a year or longer.
Is yours?
Go ahead, we can come back.
Ms. Reed.
I think I was just piggybacking, because using the general terms, it feels like, oh, they could almost be an innovation lab, they could almost be in CSP. So I guess the difference is the age group, because you're not handling the 9th and 10th graders. That wasn't clear when I read the document, that the original program that we're replacing is just 11th and 12th graders, and then it's the location. So I'm just, like my fellow board members, are just trying to figure out, and I know everyone doesn't fit in a clean bucket, but what the difference is.
I think the major difference with me for CSP and Windrose will be the level of support, therapeutic support the student needs. They would be in CSP. As for Innovation Lab, that's more project-based. The kids are more independent than I would imagine Windrose students to be. Would you agree with that?
Who's up?
First of all, I'd really like to thank you for the development of this program. I have visited the school a number of times. I know what exists, where you were thinking you were going, and where you got to, and I can see evidence of the process that was used to develop InLab being put into place with this process, and I really appreciate the work, the structure, and the potential long-term nature and breadth of where this could grow, and really appreciate that. I do have some questions, as I'm sure other board members do as well, just in flushing out all the specific details. I think overall I'd like to just start with, what do you see as the biggest challenge to actually executing what you want to do, and what steps along the way to get there? Because you're starting with 25, which we would all agree is too small a population, but we all start someplace. But where do you see this growing to? And you're working with students that are at 1.75 GPAs, but where else might it grow? What, as other board members have talked about some of these other programs, where might there eventually be overlaps that as we move towards the future, towards tougher budgets, where can we find efficiencies that we're still meeting the needs of these students, but that we've created a program that may truly benefit other students in the high school as well?
So I think for me running the program, I think my biggest challenge is going to be making sure that we're doing everything we're saying we're doing and implementing the program with fidelity, making sure that we are able to align the academics with the careers and the internships, and going out and even though we're starting small with 25 students, it's because we're still developing the program. And we anticipate that we're going to be going to the job sites, checking on this, or the internship sites, meeting with internship sites to see how the students are doing, aligning what they're doing in the classroom with the careers and internship sites, and then also developing more sites, because we envision that the following year we're not going to focus on forensics; it'll be another career area, and so where we still have to develop that.
I think one of the
And I want to preface this by saying this is their work. I've been tangential to this, but one of the conversations we had is we don't want it to grow too big. We want it to, just by nature of the fact that we really don't want this population to become bigger and bigger. We want to make sure that we're meeting the needs of most kids so they don't get to be overage and under credit, so that they don't get disenfranchised from school. So a lot of what needs to happen is a cyclical back to the high school of, here's what these kids are saying happened in 9th grade. Here's what these kids said happened in 10th grade, so that we can start trying to head kids off. At the point that we do recognize there will be kids, maybe 25, maybe 35, who, despite everything we have in place at the high school, will not be able to make it there. So the goal is not to grow this bigger and bigger and bigger. The goal is for this to be for that small group of kids that really need this very intense support and much more graphic connection between what I learn in school and what goes on. And for this not to be an off-site program for the staff. Our goal is that they are integral parts of what goes on at the high school, feed back into the high school what they're learning about the kids, so that it doesn't become a huge program. We're learning, and I think that's the point of Innovation Lab, you know, that all these programs feed what they learn about kids and what they learn about instruction back into the general ed high school.
But Mary, that's a proposal, what you just said, right? I mean, that's a policy decision, right?
That if I'm learning that being more hands-on works well for kids?
No, I think if I heard you right, you said, we don't want this program to be above this. We want this program to, the built-in assumption in your statement is that kids should be in one of the other programs, and that this thing is an exception case. And I think you said, if I heard you right, you talked about it in a way like, I want to get kids out of there as quickly as I can to get them, quote, back to I forget what word you used, but you were talking about essentially the other general programs in the high school. And
the information feeds back to the high school. I think that's what I was trying to say, is the cycle is that the information of what we learn here feeds back into the high school, so that we're not seeing, if kids say, I'm being disenfranchised from the high school because when I go into class, no one talks to me. You know, if we get that information back to the high school and say, if you greet kids when they come in, you might find that that works better for kids.
I'm going to save this up for the end. I'll just tell you, just speaking as an individual, I hear that and it's troubling to me. And the reason it's troubling to me is when we continue to talk about this program as kids who are, troubled, problematic, what have you, that has the potential to become self-defeating to the program being successful, right? I like to think of it as just me, I like to think of it as you know, there's not a one size fits all. The day of factory, the last century was all about the factory model of education. The big message is that model is finally dying, and it's going to be replaced with something else, and we're all in the middle of that being replaced with something else. It's happening in all other sectors of our economy and our society, mass customization. The thing that I tend to think about that, Matt, maybe is we have different kids who have different kinds of needs. And there are some kids, these kids aren't, you know, I don't like to think of it as they're troubled, they're problemed, they have a set of life experiences for whatever reason that these other delivery models of education are not meeting their needs. So I tend to try to think of this thing as something, it's not better, it's not worse, it's just different in the way we're trying to deliver education to deal with every kid. You know, I'll end on this little diatribe, we're going to talk later about graduation requirements. We have a set of kids who, you know, for whatever reason, they have some challenge in getting to our standard, you know, graduation requirements. But, you know, it doesn't make them better or worse, it just means they've got a particular situation that we have to address. So I think it's important. And I'm trying to check that. If you guys as the educators say, yes, that's how we think about it, and that's what it is, that's really helpful. If we're supposed to think about this a different way, and not in that context, I think we need the help of the educators to really tell us that. Oh, Ms. Erickson.
I just have three sort of factual questions. So the first is this expected to start this fall? Do you have your population of students identified?
They say that.
So we have 151 students that meet those 4 criteria. What we have done is we've gone to the house-based SAT programs. We've presented the students. The next step is the houses are talking about each of the students, and then we're going to meet again to talk about the kids.
So you're in the process of identifying the students now. So the students who are there now, they can elect to stay, presumably.
Some of them, if they need more of a support, they could go back to CSP. So we've been having those conversations.
Okay.
With the staff.
And the second question I have is just factual. So I know we are required to offer an alternative high school program. By just offering the Windrose program to juniors and seniors, do we fulfill that requirement? What about the freshmen and sophomores?
I'm sorry, Laura, can you say that question again a little slower?
I believe we're required to, by mandate, to have an alternative high school program.
Mm-hmm.
And since Windrose, as I understood this document, is available to juniors and seniors, are we meeting our requirement for freshmen and sophomores if there is a requirement for such?
Does anybody know the answer to that? I don't.
You don't have to answer now.
I can look that up, but I don't believe there's a requirement for grades. So
I know it's an alternate, it's a
Mhm.
question, I'd like to know. And then finally, on the, I did like the pilot course for the SEL course, the Castle course.
Mhm.
My question is, it doesn't look like those students are going to be getting credit for it, but it's a prerequisite in order for them to leave campus to do the internships. Is that correct? Is that?
They would be taking the first semester, and then we would like them to be able to earn elective credit for it.
What's elective credit?
Mhm.
Okay, so they will have credit for it. Okay, great.
Ms. Applebaum.
I was interested in the internship program, and you mentioned working with family centers. I just wanted to get a better understanding of who would be overseeing which aspects of that, what would be run by Greenwich High School, what would be run by them, and how that would work.
So we met, we've been meeting with the town of Human Services and family centers to talk about the needs of the students within our population. And we put together a proposal that we're waiting to hear from a foundation to see if they're interested, where they would hire the person. It would be a family center's personnel. They would come and be housed with us at the alternative high school at Windrose. And from there, they would go and they would meet with the job developers, they would meet with the kids. If there was a problem on site, they would sit with the kids, talk about it. If there was anything that required a higher level of social work, they would refer back to the social worker at the alternative at Windrose. It would be the Windrose teachers that were aligning the academics with what they were doing on the site. But obviously there has to be a conversation that's happening there. the internship coordinators, what we call them. They also would be coming in and participating in our SEL course when it's appropriate to talk about job sites and what things are happening there.
Yeah, absolutely.
It mentioned something about whether you had a coordinator, the internship coordinator or not, what you gained and lost, but also that there was a potential cost associated with having that person. So presumably if you get the grant from the foundation, then there's no cost at this point, but do you know, at some point it would probably be helpful for the board to have an understanding of what that cost long-term might be and how it would fit into the current structure of the high school.
Okay. Our intentions, just so I can answer that, is that we would each year go and try and get more funding for it next year. So we have the current foundation that we're talking to. Most likely will fund, well, they said they most likely will fund this person full-time, but then next year they would like us to look for other foundations to help support it.
Ms. Raven.
Thank you for reaching out to our other town agencies and community partners. I think I've mentioned that a couple of times. I had a factual question, I guess, if that's the way to phrase it. When you compared the head count of the existing program to the new program, I noticed there's half a security person. So if you can just describe the difference in the current program and the new one.
I think that happened to somehow get put in there. That shouldn't be there. We're not getting a security guard.
Dr. Francis.
So overall, I thought this was very exciting. You kind of engaging this great sort of as a relief on this and bringing some new ideas. One of my concerns, and I was happy to see sort of starting 11, 12, but then maybe about 10, is sort of, you know, those students that sort of fit that profile that we know of from middle school. Do you ever imagine trying to do this in 9th grade, catching them earlier before maybe they start to have those troubles, if you know that's where they're heading? And then the second piece was, as I was reading it, seemed very exciting, and then I sort of felt like there was fairly limited options in terms of the career piece. And then I heard you say, well, this year we're going to do forensics, but then next year we might do something different. And I feel like that moves a little bit away from the personalized part, which is sort of figuring out what the kid really would engage with. So, you know, if a kid has interest over here, but your program only really brings them into careers that are here, is that necessarily going to pull them in the way that we want to?
Right. We have each student that they're going to have their personalized plan. Through the forensics course, we're using that as a base code. It could be anything career police related, criminal science related, law and America related. From there are a lot of careers that offshoot those interest areas. If the kid has said that he's interested in another option, we would still explore that. We wouldn't say no. But we're trying to, for staffing purposes, we're trying to limit it to like 3 general areas, just so we can approach. We have a list of jobs that we can approach for possible sites.
I'm really interested in whether these kids are going to get job training. I know there are 2 workplace experience courses, and then I know there's also off-site internships. Who's responsible for delivering real skills to these kids?
On the job, we do have a professional assistant that we could throw, and if they needed support, we could do that. The internship coordinator and the staff will develop a job description, what they're supposed to do, make sure there's a clear understanding, and then by the follow-through, making sure we're in communication with the site and the student to problem solve, see what any issues or concerns are. But ideally, we would like also the employer to take on a role of doing some sort of training if needed.
Let me before you do that, Chris. Sally, we talked about this week in agenda planning. There's a couple threads that need to be pulled together. This thread, because this team is clearly trying to figure out something for their program on their own that makes sense for them in their program. We're about to have an update on career and technical education. Okay, so that's a team of people working on that. That thread needs to get connected. It also connects back to something we had a report on 2 months ago from guidance. These threads aren't as connected as they need to be, but there's an opportunity there. It's a real opportunity to try to connect these conversations together and maybe get some leverage from the efforts of one to the other. I don't want to try to address it now because we're trying to focus on Windrose, and maybe we can, revisit that because it'll take us off track. But I think, when we talk about this career and technical education, we got a written report this week. We're not talking about it tonight. We're going to take it up in 2 weeks. It would be helpful if maybe we come in, whoever's going to be doing that presentation, that connection we talked about earlier this week. This is yet another example. And that's a nice way of saying we'll come back to this subject. Ms. Dayton is been quite a voice on the board about this subject, so it's about to come up again, and you guys might want to connect with the team that's doing career and technical education 2 weeks from now. Okay?
If I could just elaborate one little bit in response to your question. I originally went to the team when we were talking about the internships, the job training, and something that very much impressed me, I thought you would want to hear, is that some students are ready right now to go out on internships and get job-supported skills. Others are not. And what they said was, there are some, it may take us a couple months, a semester of intense interview practicing and showing up on time and the kinds of things that are necessary to succeed. And so I think that's through the SEL class, as well as the very tight, lots of meetings and very small relationships or ratios of teacher to student, they're going to try to address those skills.
Ms. Erickson.
First of all, I want to commend the team, all of you. This is a very thorough report. It was a pleasure to read. We clearly had identified quite some time ago that we had some issues with the alternative program that needed to be addressed, and I think this sets forth a real solution. My question is, and I think you have more questions, is just what do we need as a board to do to implement this for this fall? The one thing that comes to my mind is elective credit for the SEL course. I'm on board with that, but I'm not sure if there's a means that are giving credit to do that. It's a pilot course, so maybe there's a workaround, but I just want to be sure that from a board perspective, whatever we need to do, we identify the issues and are out in front of them.
I think I've got some questions on implementation. I think some others do. I was going to go to that part next. But are there any more questions about the target, the intent? Are there any more on that before we go on to talk about the implementation part, or the recommended implementation, I should say?
I guess just metrics for success. What are you going to look at?
I think they have those.
I know there's a bit in the document.
Okay. Was there more?
Yeah, so if you...
I'm sorry, Laura, why don't you go through that? That might be helpful.
Okay. We'll just pull up that.
Oh, by the way, thank you for the SMART goal part. Take note, everybody.
Okay, so we're going to look at the attendance, relationship skills, a number of course failures, GPA, emotional regulation, if they're able to participate in the work experience, and the credits earned for graduation.
I just have one question with that, because you had that in the report, but it had a blank and then percentage. So I was curious as to who was setting the percentage, and was that percentage individual students or the program as a whole?
So it's going to be the program as a whole. We don't have the student population yet, so we didn't know if the students would come in and they'd have however many days absent, so we couldn't set it yet. And we wanted to make sure we were realistic with it.
Ms.
I wanted to know if you were going to collect any standardized data on these students as they enter the program, since some of them might not have any standardized data, and just wondering whether you're going to do some kind of systematic assessment of their very basic reading, math skills, writing, and so on, so that you could adapt the program to their individual needs. That would also give you some pre and post data that I think, because the rest of it is all very subjective.
Right, right. We can have each student, when they come in, take the STAR assessment for the reading and the math. And we can include that as part of our intake. We can also look to see if they took their PSATs and what other standardized tests they've taken.
Yeah, because you would hope that they would be taking some of the same standardized tests that are required of 11th and 12th graders.
Yeah, Ro, I think Yeah, go ahead.
One other question, this program is going to involve special ed students. So is there going to be a certain ratio of special ed students to other students?
We haven't discussed that.
Okay, so fine.
Ms. Applebaum.
On the topic of assessment again, you talk in the report, it discusses the POL, which I would love a little more explanation of, and then that being used as a definition for mastery, but I was just curious how you were defining mastery. Was that fitting into how we're defining mastery for the district as a whole as we move towards personalized learning and those connections?
So each student, when they come into the program, is going to set their goals. With the staff, they're all going to have the paths, and basically where they are, we're going to set academic and social emotional goals and career goals. So the presentation of learning is at the end of each semester, where they're going to present on their goals, reflect how they did, if they met them, if not, what barriers came in the way, and then what their goals are for next year. So based on that, and I think that the mastery data will be based on how they're performing in this. I'm not really sure I'd consider the POL a mastery based.
So they were two separate things. So
yes.
That was one was about goals, and then the classwork will have its own set of assessments, just like any other set of classwork. Okay, thank you.
Implementation. Do you guys want to say a thing about just a short overview of? It's on page 35, but if you could just give a short summary of what you're proposing in terms of implementation and what you asking to happen when, that might help us.
So for the first year, we would like to pilot the SEL course that will be offered for a half hour each day. The credits assigned in a personalized manner, so the students would take through an online program such as Odysseyware. We would do a pre-assessment to figure out what skills that they have and what they've already learned through the course they've previously failed. Do an assessment, and then based on that, allow them to take those units, and if they pass it, then they can earn however much of the credit depending on what they took. Let's see. Then we would like to propose the humanities and STEM courses. So math and science being co-taught, and the English and social studies as well. The alternate means for credit recovery, so students be able to take credit online, do independent studies, internships, work experience, and then the career and work study program that would be implemented by family centers if we had the grant.
So that's what you want to do in 17, 18?
Yes.
And just in terms of location, we're leaving this where it is? So this proposal is leave the program where it is, change it, restart it, or start it. Actually, I'm not going to, it doesn't matter what happened before, right? Start it in its current location. I'm sorry, let me say that in emotions. Forget the current location. At St. Catherine's, in the building that's at St. Catherine's. By the way, if nobody's ever been to that building, it's a really nice place to have a little school. It's amazing what's happened there. Unfortunately, it's going to get too expensive, but that's a problem for another day. And then do these four things that are on page 35 and the top, bottom of 35 and top of 36. And then you're asking for an endorsement for the intermediate years, right? These things in the intermediate years as well. That's the next step. So that's 18, 19. What I'm trying to get my arms around is if we're accepting this recommendation 2 weeks from now, what is it we're actually signing up for? So we just are trying to get really clear. Is that what the ask is?
Well, a couple things. First of all, if the program isn't successful, it's not going to attract students.
Sure.
And if it doesn't attract students, it's not going to be able to move into the intermediate years. So that's literally, we were on the brink of extinction, and they redesigned this program. And I would like to just back up one point. I think Ms. Raven, your distinction was very important. That yes, these are students for whom working at Greenwich High School has not been optimal. It may be optimal at some point, but we're creating a program that we think will serve their needs. If not at St. Catherine's, we believe it should be at an off-campus site, or, and this is what the team spent the first month and a half working on, at the high school off hours. Advantage there is that it's a supreme location with all the resources available at the high school, all the CTE programs that you mentioned, those facilities are not easy to come by. We have them at the high school. We could take advantage of them. We have a lot of expertise. So that, I think what happens next year is get the program going in terms of the career development, the purpose for learning, the connectedness, and we have to solve this question of where is it ultimately going to land, because we have one more year on this lease at St. Catherine's. It's an expensive lease. It's not an ideal, 2 more years, it's an expensive lease. It's not an ideal setting for us, but it might become one. But we still have in the back of our minds that the high school could be a very viable alternative afternoon, evening type program. We think that would be very attractive to a lot of students, and that would allow us to really take advantage of the work opportunities, maybe in the morning or a morning type shift. So we're excited about those possibilities. I think we need to make sure the program programmatically functions well next year as we continue to figure out the long-term location and what exactly that looks like.
Sorry, a question just popped into my head. Is there a family engagement piece of this, much like with the AVID program where there's a contract that the student and their family signs? Is there anything of that nature anticipated?
We would like the families to sign off with their committee as well. As part of it, we have where the parents are participating in the path planning. They are coming in, I think we're requesting that they come in or participate or contact us once a month. Because once a month we're going to be evaluating the students' goals and where they are with the progress. So we'd like them to be a part of it. And then we also have contact with family centers and the town of social services. We can make a referral to them if a family is not involved, if they can help identify what are the barriers to preventing the family from being involved.
So, do any of the staff members speak Spanish?
No.
Other questions?
Not currently.
I had a couple of questions. I'm hoping maybe you won't be able to answer them now, and I hope you wouldn't. You talk about 151 and 1 or more.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to me I'm always into focus, sharpness of focus. I think sometimes when stuff gets broad, it doesn't always retain its purpose. It would be helpful if you could give us a profile of 151. So as an example, it's 151. How? And by the way, I made a duplicate. Okay, you can talk to Rick. He knows a lot about deduping now. It's another exercise we've been doing. I'd be very interested to understand how many of that 151 are in that overaged and under. I'd love to see overaged and under credit, and maybe the two combined and the combinations, so that we really know who we're really talking about.
When we were looking at the data, there was 55 students that were, I don't remember the numbers, it's in the proposal, but 55 students that were over age and under credit as of in October, and then again in March.
Okay.
So no, and then the specifics we can get it through.
Yeah, if you can just, by the time, just send it to us in a note so we can see it by the time we take this up on the 25th. And then the other was, I think we talked about connection to the career tech ed, and then we talked about internship and how that's going to connect. If you don't have a chance, you might want to go see our watch, put you to sleep, so do it at night. You can watch on the video our discussion with Judy Nadell about connections to other places where kids can get prepared for things under the career pathway. Because you listed that, and there's a set of career pathways, and it may help you understand a little bit what's on the mind of the board. As I say, 2 weeks from now, the board is going to actually take that up again. It's in a different context, but it's all the same connection, and we'll be having a lot of the same conversations. So for those of you who are on that team, if you haven't had a chance to look at that, and if you need to figure out exactly where that is, Ms. Eves can help you.
We've watched the planning board meeting.
Get it, yeah. They put you to sleep. Ms. Raven.
Just one final thought, more so than a question. So I'm thinking about the overage under credit, and if it's only for 11th and 12th graders, then they're coming into you and they didn't have their credits from 9th and 10th. So maybe it's kids that are moving into the district that maybe weren't with us at 9th and 10th, and then that connection, I guess, mirrored back to what you were saying, what we're learning about the program and what they were missing, because you would hope to get them if they were in the district through Stand By Me or something in 9th grade, so they don't get to 11th and be overage and under credit.
Ms. Hutton.
Sorry, just one technical question. The name, has it been researched from the standpoint of we know that it's available to us? No comments about it, just do we know that if we want to, put it on paper and promote it, that we legally may?
I think I should probably field that one. It is. As far as I know, it's an ancient maritime term, so I don't think anybody has a copyright on that.
Yeah. You never know, though.
That's true. So we can investigate that. And then
I would bet what you're saying is correct, but it's worth a look-see.
Without a doubt. And to answer your question, before, I was going to chime in, but we went to something else. You were asking about the intersection of undercredit and lower GPA, lower than 1.5. And the answer to your question, Phil Dunn and Jen Lau produced that information for us. And
Perfect.
Juniors and seniors, the number is 28 who are both under credit in March and October and lower than a 1.5 GPA.
So there are 28 of them.
11th and 12th graders only.
Yes, so it's probably, what, that's 1,300, so 28 out of 1,300, roughly. Okay, thank you, that's good to know. Oh, I couldn't find it, I missed it. I don't know, but thank you. Okay, without any more on this topic?
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all the hard work. My mistake. Yes. Okay. Now we're going to discuss personalized learning pilot in mathematics.
I just want to call the board's attention to the fact that a couple of our principals are here, whose schools will be involved in the pilot, so I'm going to encourage them to participate at any point in the conversation. The report that you have is really an update. This is a picture of where we are at this point in time with respect to the development and implementation of the math pilot. And I'm not quite sure what the best way is for us to begin the conversation. Just by way of an aside, I did reach out to Dr. Gilday, shared the report with her and asked her to share with us her insights, which I forwarded to you. And having read her comments, although the language is slightly different, the concepts that she identified, and I thought they fit in very, very nicely, certainly, in the work that is being done in the pilot in each of these 6 categories that she describes under the heading of the 6 essentials of competency-based education. So I'll be guided by your pleasure in terms of how you'd like to move forward in the conversation. The work that has taken place thus far has been done on a relatively routine basis by the committee. When we first engaged the group, we began through an effort of identifying those variables that we think are critical in the work of implementing a pilot where the focus is on pacing. As I have shared with you before, the concept of mastery-based education is critical in the work of the pilot, in that the focus will be on students demonstrating mastery, content, and the opportunity that the pilot presents for us is to really focus in on our students in a much more highly personalized way than has taken place before. This is really an extension of the work of the personalized learning strategy of the district. It's in many respects kind of the next step that one would move to, and it's a very exciting opportunity to really create transformative work within the district. So with that, I'll be quiet and give you the chance to say, okay, talk to us about this, that, or the other.
Ms. Stigler.
This is going to be a very stupid question, and I don't mind asking it. With the advent of Connecticut Core, I cannot understand why there's any issue with defining what mastery is. We know what standards we have to meet, how we have to meet them, what skills are involved, and I know it's phase 2 that you're going to talk about what are the core competencies and how do we assess mastery, but for me, it just makes no sense. Can you help me understand that?
Yes, at least I hope I can.
Can you guys just move that shift down one? Can you just take that?
I intended you and Sal to share a mic, but okay.
I don't think your question is a stupid question at all. It is not about not knowing what the standards are. It is about an approach that says we have traditionally been satisfied with a level of performance that, for lack of a better term, one would categorize as being acceptable. In the old lexicon, if you will, if you get a 90 to 100, you get an A. If you get an 80 to a 90, you get a B. If you get a 70 to an 80, you get a C. 65 to 70 is a D, and below 65 is an F, and you have failed. What my partner is saying over here is that as long as you didn't have that F, you moved on. What we are saying is that D is not good enough, nor is C, nor is B. What is required is mastery, and we are going to define what mastery means. And it's not a secret, by the way. The students know what mastery means, and in the way in which this whole idea is explained to them, the conversation that may take place between a teacher and a student, for example, could look something like this. So we are going to be learning about fractions. And in order for you to be able to demonstrate that you understand fractions and what is appropriate for grade 3, you're going to have to show us that you can do this, perform in this way, behave, whatever. So now let's plan on how it is that you're going to meet that goal. And we are going to provide as much time as is necessary for you to do that, as well as whatever assistance you need in order to be able to do that. So what we have given to students, if you will, is the gift of time. What we've said is, Peter's really good in math, he can do this really quickly, and once he demonstrates that mastery, he's going to move to this. You, on the other hand, need a little bit more time. Doesn't mean you can't do it, just means you need more time to do it, and we're going to give you the time that you need in order to be able to do that. So it creates an expectation about a level of performance and knowledge that students have to meet.
I'm gonna come back to that one. I'm stuck too. Ms. Applebaum.
So just in the big picture as we go through, I'm sort of looking at the short-term goals, the long-term goals. We've got the pilots, we've got different things that we're experimenting with. And I'm just wondering if we should perhaps be, and maybe we are, and I'm just not seeing it, looking at things from the scientific standpoint of we have a hypothesis. Because we've got different methodologies that are being tried in this individual pacing and mastery program. So is it, the hypothesis is by using program A, students will move, or that the hypothesis is all students will move, and then we can evaluate each program against the same target. I'm just thinking about, as we get down the road and start to try to evaluate, we've tried to, what is going to be the measure of success? What's going to be the measure of what would be successful throughout the district? Is it more individual? So it just dawned on me here, that whole concept of hypothesis, and then what are the expectations, and then do we meet them or not?
So I want to build on that. Sal, the thing, I was going to save this up to see how this conversation developed. The thing I got lost on in the math pilot is I tried to understand, take it at its face value and try to understand what the work is going to be. And here's where I got stuck. I read this section that's on page 3, right? It talks all about the planning process, and it talks about, it's essentially the description on page 3 and 4 of what's going to happen in this pilot. And the thing that I got lost on is particularly on page 3. It says, here's the task. We have to finalize the list of elements, so on and so forth, right? And it lists a whole bunch of stuff that has to be, I guess, figured out. I got stuck in my own paradigm on the word pilot, okay? And here's where I got stuck. To me, these are like, I don't understand what the work of these pilot teams are going to be. Is the work of the pilot teams to go work together as teams and try to figure all this stuff out and then try it out? And there's going to be 4 or 5 different teams doing that? Or is each team going to be given one part of this to try to figure out, and it's going to come back together as a group? I just, and it's to your point on kind of hypothesis, you said something that I didn't read in here, which is they're going to go be testing things. I couldn't figure out what it was they would actually be testing.
I don't know that I meant testing as actual
trying out was
testing, but it's like the different pilot programs,
right.
The different presentations where I would like to execute this way. Gee, that was a good idea. I would like to execute this way. Okay. Gee, that was a good idea. And so it would be to look at, do they all work? Do some of them work better than others? That was more and where I was getting to the, how do we help describe?
Could you just clarify what the pilot teams are going to be? I'm going to use the verb piloting. What that part wasn't clear to me.
The predicate in this whole thing was the goal that the board identified, which was that you wanted a pilot where the focus was going to be on the concept of pacing. That's what you wanted us to focus on.
Yeah, no, that part I got.
Okay.
That part's clear. I don't think anybody's
okay. Okay.
Is anybody debating that part? Because we've had that goal since last August. Okay. So I don't think we're debating that part. You can be rest assured we're not debating that part.
Well, that's good. So we're on a positive place to start. I got a feeling it's going to be a long conversation. So when we looked at it through the lens of a pilot, what it meant was that there are going to be a small group of people who are going to be working on this to try to make a determination about what is this whole business of pacing all about? What does it mean? And if we are going to be focusing on pacing, what are the implications of that in terms of how classrooms are organized, how schedules are organized, how all of the exterior elements come into play so that what teachers can focus on is the work that has to be done with students in order for them to be able to demonstrate mastery. So the first question is, okay, so what are we willing to accept as mastery? That's the very first question. Not A, B, C, D, mastery. What does that mean? If we engage in a conversation, there may be 7 different interpretations of what it is that mastery means. So we need to have some agreement about that. So if we are looking at the content of the curriculum against the standards, the question that is being asked is, what does mastery mean in connection with that standard? So that's part of it. We're not sure about that. We're not clear about that. And so part of the work of the group collectively will be, let's come to an agreement about what it is that we mean when we are talking about that. Okay, so now we've come to agreement about that. What is it that we know about instructional strategies that are most effective in working with students within the context of our definition of personalized learning, which in many ways talks to the importance of transferring agency from the teacher to the student about the work that has to take place? Well, how do you do that? And part of what's happening across the district, by the way, is that teachers are grappling with that. One of the teachers in the pilot, for example, said, I tried in my class the following. The intent behind it was to take that idea of transfer of agency and see how does it work. So I gave the kids a task and then I turned it over to them. And the role that I had was different from the role that I normally assumed. And she shared her experiences with us and she said, the next time I'm going to do this, this is what I'm going to do next. Now there may be other teachers, as we look at the concept of transfer of agency in terms of looking at each of the students in the class through the lens of those students developing mastery and engaging them in the kind of work that they're going to do, and how that work has to be unique to that child based on the particular characteristics of that student. So what's that going to look like? So that's part of what we are working on also. If we are talking about reporting on performance, is that going to look different from the way in which we report progress of students now? That's a question that we have to explore. How do we engage parents in the conversation about, let's talk about where your child is in terms of mastery. What's the role of the student in that? So in some places, for example, part of that reporting is a conference that the student has with the teacher and the parent, where the student reports, this is the goal that I set, this is the work that I did, this is where I am, this is where I think I need to go in order to be able to do that. So the reporting process looks different from what it is that takes place right now. In terms of the use of technology in this, what might that look like? The array of opportunities that are currently available to us, to what extent do they connect to this notion of pacing and personalization? Are there other applications of technology or tools or whatever that can be used? How would that come into play in this? All of this has to be discussed, identified, codified in some way, and measured in terms of, is this effective or not?
Sal, maybe I can connect that conversation for a minute. So, what do you call it? Okay. All those clearly need to be addressed, right?
Yes.
Okay, and that's similar to the thing that Jill sent us, that there's 6 areas. There's probably 50 frameworks of stuff that have to be looked at that we could, that other people have developed that we could take, but they all largely have a set of basic questions that have to get asked and answered. So, as it relates to the pilot, what's the thought here? Is each pilot team is going to get asked to come back and answer those questions? How's that connect to what the 5 different, was it 5? I think it's 5 different pilots, 6 different pilot teams are going to do. 6, it's 6, right? I can't keep track of it.
We are not sending the teams out, go do the work and come back and report. We are meeting on a regular basis in the entire group, if you will, with the intent of working through each of those areas, so that in effect, what
So it's one big team instead
it
of.
is a team, a single team.
Okay, that answered my question. I was under the impression that different schools would be doing this in a different way to see what might be the best way, but what you're saying is everybody's going to agree on the same way and then do them together.
Yes and no. And
That's okay.
We're just trying to understand the proposal.
I get it.
We're not on the part of
Right.
commenting on the proposal
Right.
yet, we're just trying to understand it. We're just trying to understand it. Ms. Erickson.
So just to that point, obviously there's a lot of progress that's been made on this, but on page 26, there's an outline of various activities that are going to take place, including some professional learning. So can you just help me? Team, committee, pilot school, all applicants. Can you just help me out with some of what those terms mean?
We gave you more
Pilot school
information than
sounds
you
very
need.
exciting.
We have 7 teams in 6 different schools. And there are a total of, I think, 19 teachers all told who are participating with those 7 teams. And they cover, as we had shared with you earlier, grades from 2 through 5. So the terminology became somewhat problematic, because what we wanted people to understand was that the work of administration alongside of the work of teachers is not hierarchical. We are all part of the same team. That's why we really emphasized this notion of being a single team. All of the teachers and the administrators come together routinely pretty much every week, and sometimes every other week depending on the schedule. There are a group of 5 of us who work out of central office, who function, I guess, more as the logistical team or the steering committee or whatever. We help to frame the agenda for our meetings with the large group. We take care of the logistical things that have to be attended to. So we got to figure out a different way to call it, because I think that's what's causing the confusion. That small group meets every Thursday for those kinds of purposes. So we're setting up visits to other districts to see what's going on. We don't want our teachers monkeying around with that stuff. That's the stuff that we need to do. But every Wednesday is when the entire team comes together. On some occasions, if there's a bump in the schedule for some reason, that group might come together on Thursday. But it is not a situation where, at this point, that people are working independently. Now, when we begin the school year and the instructional process is taking place, it's going to be taking place in the 2 schools where the early number of teams are working. Those teachers will not necessarily be doing the same thing on the same day. And the role of the teacher here in constructing lessons is certainly within the purview of the teacher about how it is that she is going to be constructing those lessons. But the discussion will have taken place about strategies that we have become familiar with, which appear to be most effective in this kind of an environment. I'll give you another example of one of the areas that we explored. One of the things that we noticed from what was taking place in other places, as well as what our own teachers are doing, is that they are organizing their classrooms differently. Their rooms look different. And it's not an environmental change just so something looks different. They're designed that way for a reason. So those are the kinds of things that are taking place. So one of the early meetings was focused on, let's talk about space and what the role of space is. And if you were going to construct a lesson, what in terms of space would seem to you to be most appropriate for that lesson to be effective?
Dr. Francis.
Just a really specific thing I was
Just commenting on that because as I was reading it, I thought about this and sort of going back, Peter Bernstein, to best practices and tying things together in the district. And we had that really fantastic
day where those teachers came in, and some of them have really been working on that. And so I was hoping that you guys were availing yourselves of some of that information from those teachers who've really been experimenting with these things and seem to have had some great success. So again, while this is a personalized paced math pilot, if there's teachers out there who've really been working on how to work on their space and how to really get the most of that in terms of encouraging students, those would be good resources right here at home, I think, to talk to about that.
This is not an effort that is occurring in isolation in terms of just the teams. For example, in one of the schools, the ALP teacher was really excited about this and actually wanted to be a part of the team. Well, he is not a part of the team, but I will tell you that he is an active resource in the conversations that take place, because there is a lot to learn from the strategies that are used in the ALP classes. So we are trying to suck up wherever it is that we can the good work that is taking place all over the district.
I'm going to wade in, and what I'm about to do is risky and dangerous. And I'm not too worried about you. I am worried about the people in the pilot teams, on what I'm going to say. Unfortunately, I hope you don't take my comments. I don't want my comments to be construed as some kind of negative comment about this plan. Okay? But somebody may process it that way, but that's not my intent. Okay?
So let me, no, I say this in support of what you are saying, because we have had the conversations with the team that for us to be effective, we need to get beyond the land of nice. And beyond, but that, I don't mean by that people are rude. What I mean by that is that we have agreed that we will engage each other in difficult conversations about practice, because that's the intent for us to get better. So you're on familiar territory.
Okay. And I may be alone in this. I had envisioned this quite differently. And maybe that context got lost. Maybe my colleagues aren't with me on this. I don't know. And I'm always about connecting something to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing. The big picture for me was we, as a board and an administration, came together and committed to a strategic plan. Okay, so my context is strategic plan, and I wanted to say this as a reminder. 2015 to 2020. This is going to be important. What year are we in? 2017. We're dead smack in the middle of the strategic plan period, and that's going to become important to my context. The big idea, which I think we all got really excited about, was we were going to really transform the district through embracing personalized learning. That is the central idea of the strategic plan, right? I think the way we started to advance that conversation was, wow, you're not just going to jump to personalized learning. That's going to be sheer utter mayhem. That's absolutely not the way to do it. What we need to do is we need to pick a subject, pick a place, try to define what we meant, and then try it on for size. So when we said, let's have a pilot, it was to get us to a point where we had described, we'd said, we need to say, this is what personalized learning looks like, and let's go try it out someplace and see what we learn out of that. The expectation was, based on what we learned out of that, we could refine, right? And then we could get a, this is what personalized learning is going to mean, this is what it's going to look like. Because there's so many things, as you just listed, that have to get looked at and figured out, all right? I thought we were going to do that this year. Unfortunately, we're kind of at the end of the year. So the idea was do that pilot this year. So we're a little bit later than I'd like to be with that, but we are where we are, and that's okay. And the way that I would have thought about this, given where we are in our plan, how fast we have to go, what has happened in the landscape since we started talking about this 2.5 years ago, or more, 3 years ago, the world has really changed, and a lot has happened in education nationally since then. So when we, as an example, when we were looking at this 3 years ago, there probably weren't a lot of reference models. There were some, but we didn't know where they were. Okay, now there's a gazillion of them, and or there's a lot of them that we can go look at, where people, very capable educators, have taken a lot of time to try to figure a lot of aspects, all these aspects out. You know, what does the pedagogy look like? What does it mean to the integration of technology in a digital learning environment? What does it mean in terms of measurement? What is it, to Jennifer Dayton's point, what does mastery mean? 3 years ago, we didn't have a clear answer for that. State of Connecticut, forget State of Connecticut, Common Core kind of established a lot of it. So when we were talking about this 3 years ago, a lot of this stuff wasn't defined. Now there's a lot of things you can go look at. I would have focused the pilot maybe on a little, and I always thought we were going to do one, and I know you came to us and said, hey, I got a lot of enthusiasm. There's people who want to run multiples. I'm going to make a decision to do multiples. I think that's okay. I got behind that idea. I don't know that I would have done it this way. And this is what I would have maybe thought may have made sense would be, now that there are developed models out in the landscape that are fully articulated, that we might go out and say, given our context and our situation, we would go look at that landscape, find, if you could do it in multiples, the nice thing about multiples is you could pick 1, 2, 3, 4. You could give it to a pilot team and say, go look at this one. So go look at, you know, rotation. Go look at, there's a whole bunch of different of these. Go look at each one of those and assign them to a school and say, you guys as part of the team, you got to go look at this one. You got to look at all these elements against it. Get your team together, evaluate it, see what works, what doesn't work, what might be usable, what might not be usable, what have to be adapted in the Greenwich context. And then come away, because the purpose of the pilot is to build the learning so we can do version 2, version 3, version 4, rapid iteration of what personalized learning is going to look like. By the way, that's the way the rest of the world works now. It all works on Agile. It goes quick. It's constant learning, and that we would have done something like that, and the teams would help us evaluate and pilot and try things out. The thing that I'm worried about with this is this seems to be pretty heavily rotated on almost reinventing the wheel in isolation, in a bubble. And we do that in Greenwich sometimes. I've been here long enough to see that we kind of develop from scratch. And I think there's plenty of work that's already been out there that's done and leveraged. So I'm wondering if maybe, I didn't hear any of that in here. And I don't want you to try to answer that. I just think I would have approached this maybe a little bit differently given the time and how fast we need to actually go if we're going to hit our goals and objectives. So that's my end of diatribe transmission.
So just adding to that, I'm not sure that it's mutually exclusive, and I'm not sure that where we are is not where we intended to be and what the overall expectations were. I'm remembering that while we had said we wanted the whole year spent, we actually changed the goals and asked them to focus on middle school science, and we admitted that we would give up the pilot starting later in order to make that happen. So I think they're really on the right time frame with this. And what we've got here is what was presented. So I think it's more just
I
the
don't think that as a
fine-tuning.
criticism.
So,
My point is we have to realize where we are in time.
Right. No. So what I'm saying is I'm not sure that we're as far away from what you're talking about as what I think is here, and that it's just maybe it's as much as connect the dots, and that each of what's going on. And that's why I asked the question, was to be sure of, are we looking at individual ways to do the same thing, or are we trying one thing in different buildings and seeing how the collective success is. And I think that's where we are versus, I get what you're saying about specific programs.
Well, this plan is essentially want to hire a consultant. You read it, right? They've got a bunch of stuff they got to go through, and at each stage they want to hire a consultant to design it. Because they're asking for money at each stage to hire a consultant to design it. And I'm not if there was nothing out there, absolutely that's what you do. That's what you have to do. I mean, if there's nothing that exists that you can't look at, you'd absolutely have to design it from scratch. I'm not sure that that's quite where the world is anymore.
See, that was one of my questions, was I didn't necessarily interpret that they were hiring consultants to specifically design things, but we already use consultants, and it was shifting the use of that consultant to that particular point in time. So I may have also misunderstood.
Maybe
it's not something new
fair
versus.
enough. Maybe I misunderstood too. I shouldn't have said. Mr. Bernstein.
So when I heard 5 schools, I thought that was absolutely crazy, but the more I thought about it, it is an opportunity. I think you establish the guardrails, there's goals for everybody, the measures at the end of this are all the same, but to allow them to go off and actually be innovative, to try different methods, and there are plenty of methods out there, it doesn't take a whole lot to find them anymore. This is actually what's happening in big business, innovating, failing fast, doing pilots, pivoting when things don't work, constant testing, getting feedback. I don't want to see all 5 schools doing the same thing because I don't think we're going to get anything that's going to tell us what the best practice was, other than it will validate whether or not what everybody tried was the same. I spoke about this with the prior superintendent. I recommended a book. I'm happy to recommend the book. This book is what's driving GE right now in their transformation. It's called Lean Startup. It is a book about innovation, and the model is one that I think would be successful. And as I read the book, I thought, God, why don't we do this in schools? And then it turns out there's about 4 pages talking about how this could be used in education. It's a great model. I hope that we don't do 5 cookie cutter programs. And knowing the teachers in some of the schools, I don't think we're going to, but I think we need to encourage them to try to expand beyond the scope of everybody to do the same thing, and I think what we get back will be more valuable than what we went in with.
So I was just going to say 2 things. Well, backing up to a little bit at the beginning, I think the concept of pace to me was something that certainly I was thinking about pre-board, pre-finishing the strategic plan as part of the ALP community. Sure. We made a statement saying we hope that the definition of personalized learning is going to include personalized pace. So I think this is certainly a piece that's been in the air and been thought about. And Mr. D'Amico would probably remember years ago me talking about this and us working on this together. So this is a long time in the making. So that's first. 2, I think that, in my mind, there's 2 components that are coming together here, and that I see you guys are going and looking at programs that are doing this. I don't think you're only looking at growing it yourself. But it was interesting when we had lunch the other day with Dr. Gilday, what she also said is, when she's looked at, some of the research that's out there and some of the ideas that are out there, you can't really necessarily take innovation and just cookie cutter, put it in a new place. That innovation and the gains that you make from that are really from the brainstorming, from the excitement, from the work that you're doing to create it. Often that excitement and that innovation is coming from the process, and it's hard to duplicate. So it's finding that magic mix in there to figure out how to do it, and it sounds like you guys are working on that. So.
Well, but Gaetan, I really want to take that on, because innovation, I work in an industry that's the most innovative on the planet. And what Peter's talking about is the Lean Startup came out of IT, the industry that I'm in. That's the way it runs now. That's why it's and it's the way it works. The entire education technology industry, this industry is the laggard industry in our society in using technology. It finally exploded, and it's why personalized learning is possible. Without this technology, it wouldn't have been possible. Every single company, including all the ones that we're using today, with the exception of Follett, okay? Every single, those are what are called dinosaur tech now. But Schoology and that IXL and all of these, they just came out of nowhere, and they run on this model. As a matter of fact, they risk what was popular and competitive 3 years ago is now obsolete.
And we have some of that in our portfolio. I don't want to get into that. The point I'm trying to make is most innovation, if you study the subject of innovation, and if you're in IT, you can't live without being fully immersed, is actually the recombination of various different ideas put together in unique ways. It is, most people think innovation is from scratch. That's people who don't understand how that works. It's, most of it is a recombination of other things into unique ways, and they build upon different things. The point is this plan to me reads a lot like we're trying to figure it all out, rather than taking pieces. I'd rather the pilot be take innovative pieces and try to recombine them. I mean, as an example, the team that was here a minute ago, they were talking, they just buried in here, buried in their report, was how do we leverage online learning and a bunch of other things. Okay, they didn't talk about rotation, a la carte learning, flipped classrooms. I can just name 10 major models in personalized competency-based learning, that the progression is based upon mastery, which is the big assertion that you wanted to make, Sal, which is great. I would rather we spend this time trying to look at those, evaluate them, figure out which pieces from which models need to be combined in a way that makes sense for us. I would hate for us to pick up our heads. I think we're going to go really slow if it's a, taking nothing away from any of you, you're all incredibly smart and capable educators, getting in a room and asking them to do that. I'd rather we pick some things, have this team pick some things. I'd rather the team go out and talk to people who've already done this. If that means sending Team A on a field trip to a school that's doing a la carte, if that means send Team B to one that's doing rotation model, if that means send Team C to see something else, have them come back, take a look at it against all of these really well thought out criteria. You got to define what mastery means. You got to define what happens with the DOE. You got to define what the pedagogy is. You got to define what assessment changes. All of that stuff, and then they come back and they bring it all back together and say, based upon this is the one model. This way, these pieces conglomerated, that we should go try in Greenwich in a really substantial way. That to me seems like a potentially better path forward to get us moving faster. Just a proposal.
Peter, I'm just gonna jump in here.
Come sit.
I'm good.
Now we need you on the record.
Okay.
We're taping the meeting.
Okay.
Go ahead.
We actually are experimenting now.
I'm sure you are.
We have read books. We have figured out what we think works in our building. And what's emerging are big questions. Big questions like, how do we handle pacing with the current reporting system? What is mastery? How do we know when we've hit it? We are getting feedback from kids like, what happened to paper pencil? We need that too. So I would be happy to share student feedback and even for you to see what we've tried. Are we there? No. But we're not waiting to pilot it, to try it.
I'm certain of that, Angela. That's
know me. We
had a really cool team who came in and talked about everything they were trying to do with personalized learning, and they're all on their little own discovery journey. And by the way, that's great. We want that to keep going. I'm sorry, I was making a little different point.
Right.
We want all that to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anybody wants to stop any of that, right? No, all that really cool stuff from when these teachers came in and told us what they were doing. Keep doing that. As a matter of fact, if more people do that, we want that. This is this is alongside that.
Right.
Okay, so what we're talking about is what we're going to do alongside it. I'm sorry, Ms. Erickson.
I respect this debate and this dialogue, and I think I respect the point of view, but I think we all have to remember we're talking about elementary school children in the early grades when the foundations of math and numeracy start. So I don't think we want our kids to be guinea pigs per se. They need to be, and I know you're not saying that, but I think we do need to be mindful that we have a central office team who's going to have to be working with all these teams, or however you want to, the central office committee, working with however you want to call it. And whatever we learn from these pilots, we need to leverage across the district. So I don't mind taking our time and being thorough and making sure everyone's on the same page. And I have every confidence that you are looking at what's working, what is research-based, what is good best practices. I mean, I would be shocked if you weren't looking at that, as well as what's going on right now in your building. So, again, this is a big leap forward for us. I think we're all going to learn a great deal from this. And while I appreciate what goes on in business, sometimes it's frustrating that we can't translate it to education. But at the end of the day, you know, parents have to be very comfortable with this. This is a shift affecting their children, and we can't afford to fail fast with our kids. We don't have them very long.
No, Laura, I agree with you. Let me make my point. I didn't make it clear. This to me doesn't sound like a pilot, and I'm not even sure we should be doing a pilot. That's what I'm saying, because pilot is actually testing it on kids. You know what this sounds like to me, which is I think is right? This is a research project. Okay, and it needs to be a research project. I'm not so sure we're ready for pilot, try it on for size with kids. I am very worried, and I didn't verbalize it with what I think you're saying. I do not want to use this with guinea pigs on kids. I don't think anybody would. I don't think the administration would do that. Even, I mean, we shouldn't even talk about that. But it seems to me that we're at a stage maybe where we need, and this is good work because it's been identified what's got to get looked at, and everything's included. I'm wondering if the step isn't a pretty healthy, robust research project of what's already out there. Then they can figure out exactly what they want to try. I think a pilot is try, and maybe I'm hung up on the language. I think I said that at the beginning, but I wasn't clear. I'm worried about that language, and I'm trying to clarify what actually we're going to do. They clearly are going to try to design some stuff before they do it. That's in here. I'm just wondering if we might not render that explicit. And it's just food for thought. It's what's on my mind. This is a work session. We're not voting on this. I'm just trying to verbalize what's on my mind. Mr. Mercy.
Yeah, I'm basically where Peter is. I mean, they're laying the foundation now to figure out what it is we're trying to do, and at the back end, how we're going to measure success. But it's that piece in the middle where I don't want to hamstring the teachers. I don't want to see them not having the ability to go off and try, because we've tried that again and again and again, and basically we are not moving the needle at all. And what we've learned from the teachers that are out there doing it, we have about 900 teachers in the district. Each one is doing their own pilot on a daily basis. They're all doing it differently. We need to learn what works best, and we need to take that and share it in each of the buildings. Kids aren't guinea pigs, but you know, every once in a while, we do need to do things a little bit differently. Sure, the pace moves differently. That's fine, that I understand. But I think where we fall down is we're not learning what's really working, and this is an opportunity to give the teachers the leeway to figure out within those guardrails what does work and what doesn't work, so that we can do it for everyone.
It's a good conversation. Let me try to add a little bit more to just mix it up too. Respectfully, we're not in the third year of personalized learning, and I hope nobody thinks that we are, because we're not.
Yeah.
We're in the first year of personalized learning.
If that.
If that.
Yes.
Because if you recall, one of the conversations we had early on was getting agreement about what it is that we mean by personalized learning.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the work that is taking place across the district is taking that definition of personalized learning and people working very, very hard to operationalize it. And the work that our principals have been doing, and we still have work to do from an organizational point of view, is to make sure that the effort is going forward in every single building. Because a lot of the conversation that has taken place has been creating familiarity with leadership about, okay, what does this mean and how do I lead for it? And at the same time recognizing that teachers have embraced this idea and they are continually making efforts to take personalized learning as they understand it and begin to put it into place. So That's a significant plus. To go to some of the points that you've raised, we're not trying to create this from scratch in a vacuum. We have visits that are planned to other places that will be taking place this month, where we're going to be looking at the work that they're doing through that same lens that you're talking about. So if you are telling us that you have been focusing on mastery and this is what you're doing, we want to see that so that we can take from them whatever it is that they have learned and bring it back and incorporate it in any way that makes sense for us. The other thing in terms of trying to learn from others rather than building it ourselves, the reason why we have engaged the consultants that we have to come and work with our staff is because they've been doing work with other places about this whole idea. And so they have a measure of expertise that we want to learn from. So it is yes, seizing on what is taking place in other districts where they are doing this, and to the extent that it connects with what it is that we are doing, to beg, borrow, steal, and modify it in any way that makes sense. You remember at the CAPE conference when we went to that workshop on personalized learning? We looked at it and we said, this looks nothing like what it is that we're doing. But I understand. The point that I'm trying to make is that personalized learning is a buzzword right now. It is. So everybody is doing stuff that they think is personalized learning. You've got the book here. I've got a Ed Leadership magazine on my desk. Every article is devoted to that. I mean, there's so much stuff out there. And sifting through it and recognizing what it is that connects with what it is that we are doing. So I don't want you to think that we are not encouraging experimentation, because that's what our teachers do. But the other resource that we are giving them now in a much more organized way, if you will, is to be able to say to those teachers, look, we're experimenting with this, if you will. This is the kind of help that we think we need. A conversation that we had yesterday when Phil shared with the group, the accessibility now that they have to look at every individual student through one of the portals on ECRIS, and the conversation that took place about that in terms of, oh, can we add this, can we add that, can we add the other thing, because that's going to give me more information that I can use in hand tailoring the work that we have to do. So what we tried to do was to put down on paper in a neat, discrete fashion, if you will, something that you could look at. But the implementation of this is a lot more sloppy than that, as all of you know when you're involved in doing some kind of innovation. So we are taking from other places. We are going to try to apply that. We're not going to sit here and work from a blank piece of paper and invent it all ourselves.
Ms. Davis.
I understand, I sympathize, and I thank you for all of the hard thinking that it takes to come up with something brand new. All of these students will have to take the Smarter Balanced Assessment at the same time at the end of the year. I would feel a lot more comfortable if you could provide to us a set of expected student outcomes with time frames so that we know what the guardrails are, so that we don't get to, let's say, February and discover that a whole bunch of the standards we're not covering because we have got a pacing plan that doesn't match up with what has to be measured on that SBA. So that's what my comfort level is.
Herein lies the problem.
Well, but Jennifer, Ms. Davis' point is very well taken. You have to start with a set of constraints that are immovable, right? And then everything else is movable, right? And like it or not, that's a constraint. You know, if you care about it, if you want to say, if we wanted to say as a district, because I don't think the community would tolerate, I don't care about proficiency testing, and I don't care. You know, I venture to say our community would probably not embrace that, right? So, but so you have to deal with that as a reality and a constraint, and it's a you know, the practical and the pragmatic. Ms. Raven.
I'd like to make a motion to extend the meeting, and I just want to do this once. We don't hopefully need it. I'm going to extend it to 11 p.m.
Second.
Yeah, that's enough.
All those in favor? 8-0.
Yeah, we need to change that policy for work sessions.
Weigh in.
Um,
Do you want me to answer that?
Yes. We have another 2 hours.
No, we got about 5 more minutes on this topic.
So first,
first and foremost, innovation and risk-taking is alive and well. I want to assure you of that. And if you don't want to take my word for it, come out and see it. But what I will tell you I've been grappling with the most, and so has my pilot team, and since we're one of the first teams to go, we want to make sure we get this right. We want to do right by the board's charge. We want to do right by the students that we serve and their families. But I've always felt that there's a disconnect between the board's charge of linking this unknown to this known constraint of pacing. And to me, if you really want us to develop the opportunities for kids to work within their own means of success, you have to take that and be a little bit more flexible with what you're asking. The result is what you want. Where are we going to be when it comes time to measure student performance against the standard? And so the way we've been approaching it in my building, and we did this work for 6 hours today with one member of the pilot team, and then I brought in the team leaders of the 2 grade levels beyond, because for me, I need to be able to answer to the families of the students, not only in that grade level who will experience the pilot, but how is that going to affect the 3rd grade and the 4th grade and the 5th grade experience. And what we determined today was, based on the math curriculum that we have, our pre-unit assessments measure readiness for a particular standard and a particular skill at that level. Our entry point for students, and this goes back to pacing, once we determine readiness, we can then cycle out students who haven't met the readiness criteria, go back in the learning progressions and determine our entry points. That gets into the personalized learning point. Once we have isolated and determined entry points for all students, then we create the blended learning environment and we infuse the digital technology. Then we infuse different personalized paths, whether it be something regarding physical setting, whether it be instructional approach, or whether it be pacing, whether it be the need for a teacher to accelerate or remediate. It gives us the information we need to know that when we get to the standardized assessment, we have the data that tracks all the way back to the start of the school year that allow teachers to set a course or a path to allow kids to get as close to as ready as possible, regardless of whether it's a year's worth of growth that they needed to make or more than a year's worth of growth. We can develop a plan that will get them in the most assured position to be ready for the test.
Okay, thank you.
So I don't know if that's helpful.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
So just a quick question with that, with what you're doing. Say you have the student who, when you do the readiness, they're already there. So now you're going to escalate them. So for some it may be a single grade level, for some it's 2 grade levels, but then they come back to take the standardized assessment. They moved on to, since we're talking about math, higher learning and pieces that may no longer be so what they may be tested on is not what they're actually being instructed in. And have they moved beyond where it's so basic that they can't do well?
So there's a couple of things there. When we look at students,
No, actually, I'm equating this to the kids who are in calculus, BC senior year, but then they're focusing on geometry questions that may or may not be connected when they're taking the SAT. So it's that because they're not using it anymore. It's not they've moved beyond and they're using different material.
It's a real issue.
I think that's definitely more of a struggle for middle school and high school. For us in dealing with foundational numeracy skills, it's not as big of a discrepancy as you might think. In thinking of where our entry point is with our 2nd graders, so we're talking about 7-year-olds where they're still emerging through number sense and now building off of that. So the dispersion for 2nd graders isn't going to be as great in terms of how much we need to accelerate or remediate. But the unintended consequence of this is how much will we create in terms of dispersion after they've experienced this personalized program for a year or 2 years or 3 years. So the net result in 5th grade, what does that look like in terms of their entry point into middle school?
Right.
I just want to make one comment. When you talk about pacing and I look at what goes on in the school system, so much of what we do has to do with kids who struggle. And obviously they need more time and they need more help and so on. I am hoping that bright kids will not be left with their iPads or their book in the back of the classroom teaching themselves because they can do it on their own. I think we have to be really cognizant that they have to be measured and they need direct instruction as well as everybody else, and they have to be moved at an appropriate pace. I don't want to see them doing it on their own.
Can I take that one too? So our instructional strategy with regards to dealing with students who may be at an accelerated pace is we've leveraged the workshop model for years in mathematics. And we have found that although one mini lesson will reach 80% of the student's needs, it will not reach the outliers, the 10% who need something before that in terms of readiness, and the 10% who's already got it. The readiness assessment takes care of the way we design our mini lessons and how we approach our implementation. So now we present multiple mini lessons. So in an inquiry-based math classroom, actually you might have students who are being remediated going through an IXL exercise first to activate prior knowledge while the teacher is giving direct instruction to the accelerated group and then placing them at the center of their own learning in that inquiry model, and then shifting the direct instruction to the students coming off of independent learning exercises, having had some familiarization with activating their prior knowledge on a level below, and then the teacher takes it from there. So it really does come back to the instructional plan that's derived from the pre-assessment analysis that we need to do. And we created those maps in the hopes that you would allow us to go in that direction without giving us such tight constraints about it has to be always about the pacing. To me, I think I need more flexibility in order to be more creative. And when we're still operating in a 1900 model where we do have limited amount of instructional time and instructional resources, our flexibility and creativity is going to have to be in our implementation of instructional strategies.
Sal, I would rather, as I listen to this conversation, it's just bringing it home for me personally. We need to break this into 2 pieces. Okay, pilot is the test. We need to complete the research project, and then it needs to be written down. And it needs to, Mark sat here and just articulated his vision of what this thing is, right? And maybe it's the whole team's, I don't know. But my point is, it's obvious that a lot of thinking has gone on. I'm trying to process what he's saying. I don't even know if it's my vision of personalized learning. Okay, I know it's an evolution past, it's like, I've been on the board long enough, that's why I need to go. Someone needs to kick me out of here. Because I remember when we were talking about, we would call this differentiated learning, right? So it's not like this massive leap, it's an evolution from one thing to the next, right? And this is I call this the mass customization end of the thing, which is, it's one-on-one, it's individualized, it's dealing with the kid, in this case the kid is an individual. And, it may not be possible to fully get to a place where, teachers are dealing in classrooms of 21 kids and I'm truly individualized every single one and it's all different. I mean, that's a big question. Can you actually get there and how do you do that and what does it take to get there? What does it cost? How much resources has to take? Well, how's the whole model change? How does it fit into everything? I mean, these are not trivial questions, right? It takes a lot of brain power to figure them out. So I'm wondering if and I know you're probably going, oh my God, I have a whole schedule. I'm just looking to get the schedule endorsed. But so I don't mean to do that, but it's almost like I'm realizing this should be in 2 pieces, which is there's some really great thinking that should be articulated. It should be a dialogue. Because what you don't want, you absolutely don't want, is the 8 of us, or some subset of the 8 of us, once you go to the next milestone and you're starting to go try it on for size, someone goes, wait a second, why the heck are you doing that? That wasn't what I had in mind at all. That part's not helpful. But the only way we can be helpful and not have that occur is, kind of understand. This thing was a check-in, so this is exactly what this is supposed to be. This is exactly the conversation we're supposed to be having. I'm thinking the next check-in is one where, if you guys are doing this brain part, you're thinking about it, we got to get to a place where you fully articulate it. And even if it takes a special dedicated meeting only on that subject, before you go to the next step, which is then you come back and you say, how am I going to actually try this on for size? And with all of the concerns that I share, all of the concerns Ms. Erickson articulated, right? When we better go try this on for size, we better know exactly how we're doing that. The parents have to be engaged in it. That's not a trivial thing at all. That's what's on my mind. Anybody? Ms. Erickson.
Do you have a specific proposal to bring it back? Because I see a lot of this work is obviously May and June, and this is going to launch in September, May, August. So can it be?
I was kind of waiting for tonight's presentation to actually hear it. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to see this too. Well, actually, we're not. That's my error. So you're looking for full. I guess we're not really endorsing this. This is just the status. It's
what's happening.
It's what's happening.
But I think, are you asking for a check-in point after some of this additional work is done?
I'm thinking this plan needs to be adjusted a little bit. And the second part is as I say, I'm proposing it, but if nobody else agrees with it, I'm thinking we do need the research part. I think we need to come back. We need to give us the vision. We need to have that discussion before you go on and actually try to execute the pilot. Because I think the pilot is the test. Maybe nobody else is thinking of it that way. It's the test it out, or test pieces of it out, maybe is the way it's going to happen.
It is testing pieces of it.
Right.
Right.
I see it as testing, but I'm not sure that they're mutually exclusive. The testing out will feed into what you're saying. So we're still not saying there is one specific way we're going to execute this long-term down the road. We're still saying, at North Mayanis, you're going to try. You're looking at it this way, and in Glenville, you're looking at it this way, and we're going to identify, with the research and things which are working best. So they're coming back to where you want to be. But this is it's a hands-on trial, I guess is what I would say. So maybe I think we're getting hung up on the semantics.
No, I looked at it. I looked at it on page 12 and 13, and it seemed to me to be very componentized. The strategies are like, I'm going to go deal with this component and that component, and I was struggling with I get there's components. I get you got to figure out the components. I just don't understand how the whole thing fits together into what it is we're trying to shoot at. So. Not too dry. Yeah, I would like another check-in. I would like a check-in sooner rather than later. I haven't looked at, it came on the agenda plan. When is the next one? Do we have it scheduled? We don't.
Or can I offer a suggestion?
Yeah, sure.
Because maybe you can shoot me down, but there are many meetings scheduled, Thursdays, Wednesdays, what have you. Maybe one of those meetings could be an opportunity for board members to attend, just to hear more.
That's yeah, okay.
Like we had.
I'm going to speak for them. They don't necessarily need us to come in. That's when they do work.
But we did give feedback specifically. Remember, we had that meeting. It was a board meeting, and we talked about.
Well, that's what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about actually scheduling, and it could be around one of these. But I think it has to be clearly defined what it is, and it's a joint meeting of the board and the team.
Exactly.
Right. Yes.
The way we did in the beginning, we were
right.
Giving input on.
I just wouldn't want to climb on one of theirs if they got scheduled. That could happen at the same time. Can we? Does anybody agree with this or no? Because I'm going to suggest that we talk about it in agenda planning.
I'm a little fuzzy in trying to understand what it is that you're asking us to do. That's what I'm not clear about.
I think this team is going to go away, do some work. Part of it is research to get to a place where they come up with a clear thing of what they're going to test and trial. Is that true, or you've already figured out what you're going to test and trial? You're not there yet. And I wouldn't expect you to be there yet. No. But you're going to get to a place in this process where you're going to figure out, okay, now I got to go test and trial stuff, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know when that milestone is in that plan. It seems to me we ought to set up a check-in right before you're ready to do that, so that we're all holding hands and jumping off the bridge together. It's a bad deal if some people jump off the bridge and some are still standing on the bridge.
I don't think the group,
I don't think the group will be ready to do that until after we finish the work of the summer.
Yeah, that's okay. It could be September. I'm just trying to figure out from an agenda plan perspective, if we wanted to have that check-in, when would it be?
You get that sense?
Based on that work, is the board willing to maybe be flexible on what the original charge was, given what we find in our research?
We have to be. We have to be. That would be stupid to do otherwise, wouldn't it?
Well,
No, so I was gonna comment on this before, and then I thought, no, I won't say anything. I mean, I guess I'm not quite sure how introducing the ability to have personalized pacing is restrictive. I don't expect it to be restrictive, and I'm sorry if any way it was interpreted as restrictive. I think it was sort of saying, I think it's time for us as a district to move from everybody gets the same lesson and gets the same thing on the same day to changing that. And I didn't mean for it to be any more restrictive than that, than saying it's time for us to innovate, move forward, and use some new tools that we have, hopefully, to make that more effective. That's all I have interpreted as.
Is that what you meant when you said flexible?
That and what is...
Oh boy. Okay.
What is the connection between the pacing and what you believe mastery to be in order to further the pacing?
Let me say it this way, and if anybody says I'm not representing the board properly, just jump in, okay? Or I think we've kind of made a statement. You guys would call it theory of action. I've made a theory of action that is in this description of this. What it's written in this long descriptor of what personalized learning is in Greenwich Public Schools. I think that's our theory of action, or to use Ms. Applebaum's terminology, that's our hypothesis, right? So I don't think anybody's really interested in necessarily undoing that. Within that context, you know, the rest of it is kind of on the table. If you come back and were to say, hey, wait a second, you know, we fully researched this thing, and this piece of this is a great idea, it's a nirvana idea, but it ain't possible for XYZ reason, then I think we'd be interested in hearing that. We wouldn't want to just, you know, play 52 pickup at this point. That would probably not be what we would want to do. Does that guidance help?
Very much.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's what I thought you meant by flexibility, meaning that hopefully we didn't lay down all of the markers and it's impossible, but in terms of the broad context, I think we want to run to the end of that string to see if the concept we have is possible to do. Is that a fair representation? Yes, Ms. Dayton.
One person's view, okay? Only one person's view. Sal, I would really love to see just a written report, no discussion, no meeting, a written report on what you discover in the site visits May 8th through May 30th.
Sure.
That would give me so much more comfort as to what direction you're pursuing, and then we can wait till the fall to get an in-depth report.
So if it's agreeable to folks, I think we're just going to leave this as an item in the parking lot when we get to agenda plan, and then you guys will need to figure out when you're at that milestone. And I think we've kind of talked about when that milestone is, and we'd like to have a check-in at that point. That's it.
Yeah.
Okay? Is there more? I'm sorry, Dr. Cole.
No, it's
That's why these conversations are so helpful, because I think they help us to kind of clarify our thinking. I mean, what we've tried to do is basically using that simple model of saying, so here's the hypothesis, and if this is what we're going to, then these are the things that we have to do in order to be able to do that. And that's what we've outlined, right? So, and that includes the research part as well. So we're happy to come back. I think at the end of the work that takes place, after Karen has come, after Greg Tang has come, we're going to be in a much better position to be clearer about the kinds of things that need to take place in the classroom, that we'll be able to come back to you and report. As I said, this is a snapshot. This is where we are today, May 11th.
The update was super helpful. Good conversation. On to the next. Unless anybody's got any more on this? No? Okay. Those were our two big items, hopefully. Thank you very much. Okay, now we're on to policy revision book. E001 Program Services and Curriculum. First read, Ms. O'Neill.
So in this policy revision, there's a mandated policy that says that there's restrictions on using physical activity as a punishment. And so what we did, we took a line from our procedure E051.08 and took that statement and put it into the policy E001 under physical education. And the statement is, teachers and other school and community personnel will not use physical activity, example, running laps, push-up, or withhold opportunities for physical activity, example, recess or physical education as punishment. So we didn't create a new policy, we just took a line from our procedure and put it under physical education in E001.
So quick question, is it possible to put in this section like a reference so that where, you know, whether it's a behavioral policy or something that we might have with respect to just punishment or discipline, that it would reference back to this, that you can't use, so we don't have to add the line about withholding recess and physical education anytime we're talking about a discipline policy, because we have multiple policies that would do that. Or is everything in here?
No, this is complete, this takes care of it all. So you don't have to cross-represent, because I don't know what other policies you're referring to that have to do with discipline. That would be that specific to physical activity.
Well, we might, I'm not sure exactly where it would be, but that there would be teachers who would withhold recess because you didn't complete your reading. That wouldn't be part of the physical education, but we have that listed someplace else as far as what may be used as forms of discipline for X, Y, Z behavior.
As a point of information, I just got myself confused listening to you describe it. I thought I understood it, but now I realized I don't. Is the policy saying you can't use any of these things as punishments in anything we do in schools? Or is it you can't do these things in a PE class?
You just can't use physical activity as a punishment.
In anything?
Right, you can't withhold recess, you can't do these things.
Okay, I'm sorry, because I misunderstood it. I thought this thing was a change that said, you know, like in PE, if somebody didn't perform, you can't make them run around 3 times, right? Or the old adage of football, a year late, run. You won't be able to do that anymore.
No, we haven't been able to do it for a number of years.
I know that, okay.
Actually, when I was back teaching, but anyway, we've never written it down.
No, but that's okay. The thing that I got lost in, to me, is this sounds like this needs to go with our disciplinary policies, not with our PE policies. That's the one that I'm not.
Yeah, we have it in procedure. We have it in procedure. It's procedure E.
We have it in code. We have a conduct, don't we?
It's a procedure.
By the way, I'm with you. I know this needs to get done. I was just.
I mean, we can make it really simple and just make it a policy. I was trying to simplify things.
No, I know you were. I appreciate that.
I really thought this would be the easiest one to do.
I was just trying to understand what it. Now that I understand what it is. Okay.
How long have you been
Ms. Erickson. Ms. Erickson.
I'm just wondering if you happen to know the state statute that this policy refers to, and you can get back to me. It's not listed in the, and I know it still has to go legal, but I just like to look for the statute.
I'm sorry, Ms. Dave.
I'm totally in support of this, no change, move on.
That's the first read. Okay, now that we've got that established.
I understand the comment. I think it's an interesting one.
it does come out of our wellness, that line, so we do have it in other places.
It is. That's a really good point. It sits there in our strategic and wellness. So it's in two places. It's in wellness and it's under physical education.
It's gonna be in our policies one way or the other. I don't have that wasn't my question. I have learned the hard way, that, you know, if you gotta hunt around in 4 different policies to figure out what's really up, you know, that.
You have to do that with our policies anyway.
I know, but I'd rather not add to it.
They're horrendous.
Because I think we've learned that, yeah, okay. That's,
So
the
we'll be coming
proposal
back
is
to
to
this.
put it here.
That's the proposal. So we'll be bringing it back again because this is the first read. And we'll look up a state statute for it.
So my only question is, because when I read this, my first reaction was this related to PE, and then I saw the part 2, and I was like, oh, wait a minute, this isn't just PE. So I just want to caution that we don't end up with something, I don't have a problem with this being here, but that it's not the only place that this is listed, so that if somebody is looking about discipline, that they wouldn't necessarily come and look under physical education. And that's the only question I have.
I was gonna say, if you weren't sitting in this meeting, I would do the same thing. I'm with the same thing. It's the administrator, it's Chris Winters at the high school. He wasn't here. Tomorrow he's gotta go look up what he can do. Is he likely to go look here and find it? And, right, and that's
But
my,
that's the way all our policies are. Because you have
okay.
whole child development that talks about wellness and behavior and punishment, and then you've got a wellness policy, and then you've got a general.
Okay.
Our policies are bizarre. You
Not
cannot,
that
you
Emily,
cannot
don't make
logically
that
find
down.
them. You can't find them logically.
Okay.
Anyway,
Okay.
the next one is a good one.
Okay. Any more, I was gonna say, any more on this subject?
Well,
No, first read, okay,
it's
we're,
only that first read.
I know, well, that's the whole point, right?
Yeah.
Okay, next item is,
So the kid does.
E
Kid
004
has to retake something
graduation
or whatever, he
requirements,
can't
first
take
read,
recess
Ms.
from.
O'Neill.
So this policy is coming to us tonight in order to make sure that our
Yeah.
graduation policy is in compliance with the new state standard, new state testing policy. So we had that back, and so it's now Connecticut School Day, and also to provide alternative pathways for students to meet credit proficiency for graduation.
Questions, discussion? Ms. Dave?
I'd love to have you put the verbal PSAT, the math PSAT scores in a format that can apply to multiple years since they changed the scoring protocol. Thank you very much. Second of all, I'd like to further understand what is the difference that we're really talking about between a 50 and a 42. I don't understand, or between a 500 and a 420. I want to be comfortable with the standard of performance that pre-existed, which was a 500 or a 50, and now a 42 or a 420.
I'm going to ask Rick or Dr. Wickers if they can elaborate.
Yeah, I think you got a memorandum, you got a note on this, and that, you know, just to give you the quick and dirty answer, our policy was based on a different, there used to be 5 levels of CMT, right? No, I know that. A level 2 crosswalk to 500. The state published, when it introduced Connecticut School Day SAT, this was in that memo. The state came up with a 4-level, right? We always lived with the second level. The second level in Connecticut School Day SAT is 420 or 42. So the recommendation was to, that is one that's in alignment, right? Other changes here were not necessarily about alignment. That one is dead on alignment to the published guidance that came last August from the state of Connecticut. And it lines up to, and I think we've all learned with the PSAT, You just strip off the 0. That's why it says 42. Mr. Bernstein.
My reading of these requirements has always been to demonstrate proficiency in a topic, math, reading, writing, science. One of the recommended criteria here is students who provide evidence of acceptance to postgraduate college or university. That is not a proficiency standard. Colleges have whatever their own reviews are. They might take a combined SAT score. They may use no SAT scores. They may have other criteria. I am concerned about making sure that students who do go on to college are actually prepared for college. I don't think inserting that as a standard demonstrates proficiency in any way. I do believe that there are other multiple methods here to get these students there. I don't agree with that one.
So is yours, you're saying this one that's listed on page 5, students who provide evidence of acceptance to postgraduate college or university?
It's on 5, it's on 6.
That would be one you would not support.
That.
Yeah, I saw that. Okay, Ms. Raven?
So Peter, just to respond to that, what if they had, I don't know who the kids are that didn't have proficiency on the standardized test, but what if they had the GPA? Because not all kids test well in that standardized environment, so there's other criteria to get into college. So I'm just questioning your statement.
We actually don't have a GPA-based standard, right? They have to pass the classes to begin with. The GPA is not the equivalent of proficiency. They did well this semester, and maybe they did lousy the next, and it balances out for the year. So I don't think GPA is the equivalency. I think what we're doing though, we've got multiple avenues for them to meet the criteria of proficiency. GPA has never been listed in our graduation standard as a proficiency criteria, and I don't think it's a good idea to start there now.
Not with weighted grades.
Ms. Erickson?
Given that this policy is for students who are graduating in about a month and a couple of weeks, I support this as written in order to move this forward for this class, but I do hope that when policy governance goes and sets the monitoring reporting schedule, the reporting schedule for next year, that this policy is front and center, because there does need to be some work, obviously, and I do agree with the point, and it's a little circular, right? A lot of college acceptances are based on satisfactory completion of high school, and it's a little circular. But for this year, for this as a stopgap, it's fine.
Sal, there were a couple here I know they're, yeah, unless you can answer them, but I don't really understand what they are. It needs just some clarification. We're just going down the list. Outplaced, I understand. Community connections, I understand. I'm on page 5. This is where this thing starts, right? Okay. I don't think we need the CTAA thing, but that's semantics, because the state already dealt with that. Students who provide evidence of acceptance to postgraduate college and university. I understand what it is. I'm wholly uncomfortable with it, but we're dealing, as Ms. Erickson pointed out, this is 2017. We're talking about creating an exception condition for this year, right? I mean, that's what we're doing. Well, let's just call it what it is. Okay, can you just run through these last 3, Sal? I think these are coming from the administration. Can someone clearly explain what each one of these is, these last 3? Students who meet all objectives of their IEP.
Which I'm a little concerned about, because all is all. I mean, should there be a clarifier that's substantive or?
That's where Mr. Bernstein is, which is the purpose of this part of our policy was being able to demonstrate proficiency, right? So, as I say, I can live with some exceptions and conditions, but this part of it makes me wholly uncomfortable. So I want to really understand what's being said. I don't want to react to something I don't completely understand.
I'm going to ask Mary to join in on the conversation, but all of our students, youngsters with special needs, they all take the state exam. So we do not exempt our students from taking the state exam unless...
You don't need to press anything, Mary.
I'm sorry.
It's on.
We don't exempt our students from taking the state exam if they are students with disabilities, so all of them take the state exams. The question of the performance of the students with respect to whether or not, as a graduation standard, a performance standard, the students will have to meet the cut score, if you will, necessitates in some cases to be able to see if there are other criteria that they meet. So the program that has been identified with respect to their IEP, I think, is intended to address how it is that they're able to perform. So I'm saying this badly because I'm fumphing around here. Mary, just we had this conversation earlier.
That's a new word.
Yeah.
For the minutes, how do you spell that?
PF.
Right, I think the first part is that we don't exempt any students. So students are either assessed using the CTAA, and those tend to be students with more severe disabilities, or the students are part of the regular testing program. They have accommodations and modifications, but they still take the test. For many students, not many students, for some of the students, the fact that they sit through the test and take it is not a good indication of what they really know. So you'd have to go back to their IEP and look at what we're saying their goals should be in that area. So for example, you may have a student with a writing goal. They may not do well on the standardized writing test as, through the SBA, but their goal and objective is designed to meet their individual needs, and the fact that they have mastered that goal or objective should demonstrate that they have met what the team feels is a good indication of their competency in that area.
So that's the explanation of that one.
Of
Any
that one
question?
particular
That particular item.
Well,
Any
I'm
questions
sorry.
about that?
I'm just wondering if I need to clarify, to say objectives relating to proficiency. It's not a behavioral objective, it's part, IEPs are all encompassing, there's lots of things in there.
Right.
Right, so they don't.
So we want to be sure it's being.
So if they fail the
academic.
right, they fail the emotional or social emotional part, that's not going to stop them from
No.
graduating.
So
No,
it should be
this is in the areas that would be measured.
Someone
by
needs to modify
the
that
standardized
language.
test.
Okay.
And maybe we make that language a little bit clearer, but it was really in those areas that are academically tested by the standardized assessments.
Okay, I'll just remind myself, 2017 only, right? Okay, what's the next one? Can someone explain the next one?
We have students whose language proficiency is at either level 1, level 2, or level 3, which is not really a language proficiency that enables them to be able to take a standardized test and to be able to perform at the level that we would expect. They just don't have the language skills.
I have a question about that. Other than English, are tests available in any other languages, and if so, which one? It's only available in English?
I don't believe so.
Where's the assessment, people?
It's only available.
It's only-
How many of these kids are there?
5.
I believe there are 4.
4.
4 students that are falling under that exception.
Okay, what's the next one? Anybody have any questions about that? No? Next one?
That would provide students the opportunity to demonstrate proficiency by completing the STAR assessment and scoring at or above the level 2 grade level, or to complete a portfolio. Either one of those two.
Okay, so we threw in the portfolios then. Can you explain what a grade 11 level 2 is and how that crosswalks to our other standards? Does anybody know? I mean, it's not here. Phil, do you know?
Yeah, I would have to pull it up online too.
what the score is?
No, I don't even know what the score is. I'm interested in the correlation. I think when we last discussed this, right, the question was, let me just back up if I say this wrong. The reason we use STAR is because STAR is highly correlated to SBAC, right? Our proficiency standard is based on SBAC and SAT, right? Because SAT replaced SBAC as far as the state of Connecticut is concerned, right? So, presumably those three things are crosswalked, okay? The question I have is that if we've set the 420 on the Connecticut School Day SAT, right, which is, by the way, below proficiency, right? This is, Connecticut's standard for proficiency is higher. It's 500, I think it is, right? Right. So our level, because we've always had it in our policy to be one level below that, which is level 2. Is this grade 11 level 2 crosswalked to that standard? I don't know.
The answer is this. I have the charts here, the Bonnie Butera did the work on.
Bonnie Butera?
Oh, wait.
I was like, wow, she's back.
I'm sorry.
Who knew?
I tell you how long I've been here.
Okay.
There is a conversion chart for grade 11 that correlates the SAT for verbal for 420 that corresponds to a STAR reading score of 801, and for the math SAT of 420 for grade 11 there's a corresponding value of 747 on the STAR.
And that came from Renaissance?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so Renaissance provided that? Yes. Okay. Then, is there a reason our policy wouldn't say that?
The answer is, I just obtained this data today.
Okay.
I'd be more than happy to.
I love real time.
And we've actually had 2 students that are already assessed on this today. So,
okay.
So we could certainly give this data.
You know, if we're going to change the, I'm on to change the policy once, right? And I just was wondering if it's specific.
So they're corresponding level 2, 420, and then we got specific values in the STAR. So you'd like the specific values on the STAR?
Well, I don't know. I was just trying to be, if that's what, if this thing says the same thing as that thing, okay. I just was trying to figure out if it does.
Yeah,
okay.
we did the crosswalk.
Okay.
Renaissance was very good. I mean, they showed they basically made correlations between SBAC, everything possible.
Perfect.
But we're only doing it relative to what we're proposing here for the.
Okay. And then, what's this for complete? What's that mean?
If they don't do the STAR, if they have the opportunity to do the portfolio.
How many kids would that be?
I think we're talking 3 or 4.
Any questions? Sorry.
It's just a nit, but since it's not a defined term, can you just put it lowercase?
Yeah.
You should
No, by the way, she's right. But considering we teach kids this and we grade them on it, we should grade ourselves for Pete's sake. I don't know. Okay, go for another day. I'm sorry, Ms. Dayton.
I'm sorry this is not in order of the discussion, but as I'm reflecting on it, I'm not even sure this is proper English grammar to even have that bullet at all on English language ability. It says, students who meet the following criteria are also deemed to have met the standards. Well, that bullet point has nothing to say about what criteria you need to meet the standards. I don't think that's even English to put that bullet point in there. So I would leave it out because they can meet the other standards here. They've got plenty of choices in the bullet points.
Well, time is of the essence, right? So if they
I'm
haven't,
just saying,
if they haven't, but if they haven't met them.
I mean, you know, it doesn't make sense. So how's a parent gonna understand that? I know, but it doesn't make sense. So I'm not.
So are you saying that they should be able to meet, even though they don't have the language ability, the other testing criteria?
Some of them.
So we're talking about 4 students, I think.
I'm just saying it doesn't specify criteria we can use for those students.
This should also say, this should say, for the class of 2017, only students who meet one of the following. Well, we only need one. At least one of the following criteria are also deemed to have met. It's a little, no, but it's a little weird. Anyway, if someone could
To met the standards for graduation.
yeah, or whatever that was referring to. And by the way, I would have taken senior reading portfolio. I wouldn't do that as a tack on. I'd make that a separate bullet. That's just me. It's like it got bolted onto the end. It's weird. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, just if we're cleaning it up, clean it up, right?
Do we want to try and get this settled for tonight, Dr. Corda?
Well, we're going to get a second read at the next meeting, and then if someone wants to propose to suspend the rules and take it up for a vote at the next meeting on the 25th, that could be entertained.
Well, I believe it's allowed to entertain it for tonight, which is why I was asking the question of Dr. Corda if he'd like us to do it for tonight.
What would be helpful for us is that if the sense of the board is that this is acceptable, then it will enable us to move forward, especially as it relates to youngsters who may need to take the STAR, just so that we have the
I think you have that sense without us actually voting on it. I mean, I haven't heard anybody object to any of this. Has anybody objected to any of it? You've objected, by the way, and yeah, I was hoping to hear it, considering this is the first time we're hearing it. And
So long as the administration knows that they
I think, but if I'm not wrong, Dr. Corda, in policy governance the other day, for anybody who attended that meeting, it was a public meeting, right? I think the guidance from the board, that committee, of which there were three voting members, I was there ex officio, so there were 4 of us there. The instruction was, go figure out if you can do STAR, and by the way, for those kids, you should administer it. I think that was the instruction, yes?
And I think the other piece that would be really useful for them to know is if the portfolio is acceptable, because, and really I guess these criteria, because I think if we object to these criteria as a board, and we're going to wait another 2 weeks to find that out, then those kids are kind of stuck.
That's fair. I was going the other way. I thought I heard senior math portfolio, the portfolio is applied to 3 or 4 kids. I presume it applied to 3 or 4 kids because we presume there were, well, maybe that's a question. Is there anybody waiting to do any work? They have or have not started this portfolio work? Of those 3 or 4 kids, the numbers were 3 or 4 kids, right?
The portfolio could apply to no kids because our intention is to have them all pass the STAR.
Of course.
If they can. If
Right.
they don't pass the STAR, simultaneously to retaking that, they would be working on a portfolio. So they might go a week, take the STAR again. If they get closer, they keep working on a portfolio, which is preparing them for the proficiency level of the STAR. So they go sort of hand in hand. If we get to the end of, if we get to June 19th or June 20th and the kid ultimately does not pass the STAR, then they should have been able to complete a portfolio. If they haven't completed a portfolio to satisfactory level, then they would not meet graduation.
But you anticipate out of 647 kids, we're talking about something that would affect 5 or less, is what you're projecting right now.
I think less already.
Okay. So that's what we're really, just put it in context. That's what this item is talking about, okay? And it sounds like if you're going down the STAR route, you're doing this anyway. Is that right?
Well, we're doing it in hope that the board will approve this, so that we are prepared should the board vote to approve this.
I'm sorry, I wasn't clear on that. I think everybody's clear we want to go down the STAR route, right? You're going down the STAR route, and what I think I just heard you say, maybe I misunderstood it. For any kid who are trying to move down the STAR route, they're doing portfolio work anyway. Is that right, or no? Right, which they're doing, which is done on demand, it's being done immediately, right? Okay, that's accurate. Okay. Okay.
So the sense is to proceed as policy governance discussed, and we'll vote on this at the next meeting, I suspect.
sounds to me. Does anybody want to do it a different way? And someone's gonna make a proposal to suspend the rules. I'm pretty certain that's gonna happen, right? And in order to take it up at a second reading, right? And I think, if I'm not wrong, you guys now have your guidance, right? So, unless somebody wants to proceed differently, that's what I'm proposing. Is that?
I understand the urgency of this. I'll note this now so that nobody's shocked when we get to the public meeting. I will not be voting to suspend the rules. I believe, as I have said before, when we have had to suspend our rules, we need to anticipate these things in advance and deal with them so that we can have this dialogue, so that we can have it available in public meetings for discussion, so that we can be thoughtful in our process. But I have provided my input on the underlying things. The college one is the one that I'm hung up on, but other than that, I understand where we're going.
You know, just personally the same. You know, we're dealing with practicalities relating to kids. I think we're in this situation because of actions of adults, let me say it that way. That's probably the nicest way I can say it. But in parts of this, you know, I think we're going to have to vote. I'm going to be voting, but I don't confuse that with an enthusiastic voter.
I think both the board and the administration has learned from this process. Certainly the board, in terms of policy governance, even if we were to adhere to our policy, our original policy, it's a very inadequate policy. It makes no exceptions for special ed students or any other category. So it's the board's responsibility now to develop a really thorough, comprehensive graduation policy early on so everybody's aware of it. And
Barbara, I have a different view on that, just so you know. Looking at other districts, and there are lots of districts with ones that look very much like ours, okay? So this is not out of the blue. And the other thing on special education, I mean, this has caused me to have a little bit more of an education for myself about special education. The state of Connecticut is very clear. There are reasons they don't want exemptions for these tests, and their reasons are their policies are very clear. I talked to the head of the group that the director that does CTAA and the CAP Science checklist yesterday, and they said we're in a good place. Interestingly, this is a good commercial. They follow how many people we have qualified for the alternate assessment. They want 1% or below. Greenwich is currently at 0.9. Okay, so he kind of was patting us on the back. That said, his reason for that, their reason for that policy is to set that bar so low, because the expectation is that through our special education program, with all the interventions and adaptations, that we will put kids in positions where they can succeed at a level on the standardized test. So this is where the things are kind of in conflict. I don't think ours is that out of line. I think the lesson I took away from this is we've also got to do a much better job of being sure in our monitoring that when we set a policy that we actually are putting everything in place to help kids succeed to achieve those when we set those goals. Anyway, that's my point of view. Anybody else on this topic? Okay, so I think we know where we're going. You guys have the guidance. Hopefully we're going to see as many kids as possible at graduation. A couple weeks from now, it's always a good event. So thank you for your efforts. Next item. Policy E052, employment, evaluation, termination, and non-renewal of athletic coaches. First read, Ms. O'Neill.
Okay, so the big addition to big focus in this policy is the focus on the definition of a coach, so that all coaches, whether interscholastic or intramural, have to have a certificate. They have to have specific training, especially in the area of concussions. They have to go through training annually and updates. The other part of that is that we must have a concussion education plan for parents, and also rules and regulations prohibiting student athletes from participating in any intramural or interscholastic athletic activity unless a student or parent or brother participates in that education program. So that's the big change. That's only the stuff in red is changed. All the rest of it is from the original policy. In fact, we took some of the original policy out and we're going to move it to a procedure when they get the details about hearing procedures. So the focus really here is on concussions, training for athletes, training for parents, training for coaches.
Ms. Earp.
I just have a question under evaluations. There's a sentence that's struck about assistant and volunteer coaches and their evaluations. Is that intentional? Are we intending that are athletic or assistant coaches and volunteer coaches still going to be evaluated, but not by the head coach?
The assistant coach, because they have a coaching permit, they have to be evaluated. Volunteer coaches, they don't necessarily have a coaching permit and they are not employees of the system, so therefore they would not be evaluated.
So, assistant coaches can be evaluated by the head coach?
Yeah.
Is that what that means?
Yeah. Right. And the language is any athletic coach. You don't refer to just that head coach. If you read the first sentence,
I don't, but is that?
If you read the first sentence, basically the coaches, assistant coaches are evaluated by the head coach.
And they all have the concussion training,
They're all going to, that's the idea of the policy.
And
Change.
there's a parent notification part of this that I noticed the high school has it on their website, but I don't see it on the middle school website, so it's something that we need to really get on and move on this. So that's a major change in our policy.
Yeah. I've unfortunately had lots of personal experience with this. I just want to signal, because I know this is the first reading, this will probably go all three. And I had a brief conversation with Gus, our athletic director. We have a robust, I should say robust. We have a program in place for concussion assessment and awareness and all the rest of it. It models what's, or at least he told me it models the standards of the Connecticut Interscholastic Athletic, the CIAC, I think it is. I probably got the acronym wrong. I would, if anybody's interested in this, I'd rather use this as an opportunity to figure out what the best national practice is and articulate that and make that Greenwich policy. I'm not so sure what is coming out of the state of Connecticut is actually truly state-of-the-art in the way to address concussion. I've come to learn along the way that there's more kids who really suffer. I thought we were kind of alone. Turns out you get people coming out of the woodwork telling you stories about what their kids have gone through. So my point is that I don't think this is isolated, and I think maybe what we should do is figure out what those standards are and deal with them. I don't know whether they should put it in policy.
No, that should be up to the administration to develop.
And I would add that, I mean, while what's state of the art now may not be state of the art 6 months from now, and so we try to really avoid putting things in policy that are likely to change in 6 months.
So how do we as a district, as a policy-making body, then express that we want a particular standard? As an example, we're about to see preschool, and it does specify a very specific model in there. Okay, that may not be state-of-the-art 6 months from now, right? So it's the same issue. I guess I'm asking the question.
No, it's not the same issue. One of them, what's stated in the preschool when we get to it, is mandated. Whereas what you're asking, and I don't disagree with, is something that the administration has to do within their procedures.
How do we articulate as a board then that we want that?
I think you've just done it.
But
Yeah,
the
but
thing is, though,
the world according to Peter sure isn't how this works.
it doesn't work.
It works as the majority of the
You
board.
put it on the agenda and have the administration come back and report to you on what they develop, because that's the only way to do it.
Okay.
Can I get clarification on something, because I'm,
We don't review procedures, I'm just stuck. Okay,
Now
fine.
we can ask for a report on our program, we're directing them to get the new
Okay.
policy. We
Let
can ask
me
for an
just
update.
let me just ask this question. Would there be support amongst board members to do that? Ask for a detailed report on concussion program and
It's a
protocol.
smart thing to do.
Can we ask for a written report, review it, and if we feel like we want to move it to a discussion item, put it as a discussion item? I mean, we're trying to keep our agenda not too jammed, so.
I think that's a great idea.
My question is the word detailed report. I think we need to be, you know, is it an update? How much information, because that could be.
The program description, I think we need it. All I'm suggesting is, well, okay, fine. I'll let it go, I'll deal with it later.
One of our things is when we accept a new policy, they need to make sure their procedures are up to date as part of that new policy. So automatically that step needs to happen. So we can ask that in this case, that come as a written procedure comes into our agenda on, you know, when that's done, just to make sure we've got it elevated to that level.
We probably should do that to all the policies, and we're not going to say, so we're in procedure.
Yeah, that's my sensitivity, because we got this crazy thing built in where we don't have a mechanism to review or comment on procedures. So that's just, but anyway, I got it. Okay.
South Dakota has been sending them to us, but
Yes.
he's,
Right. Okay. All right, I'm not gonna gum up the works with this.
Well,
Yeah.
okay, let's look back to that concussion issue, because I think that's really important. The policy says that, you know, the administration is directed to implement a concussion education plan. But what I'm hearing you say, Peter, is that we want to be sure that the concussion education plan is consistent with current thinking. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah,
Consistent with best practice.
best practice, I'm in a different place. I'm in a, it's not so much the education, it's the, presumably you're educating them to run a protocol with kids, right? So, that's the part I got a little stuck on.
okay.
And by the way, Ms. O'Neill asked me about this, so, you know, this isn't the, anyway, it's the first read, I think this is before us. Why don't we try to figure out how to deal with this one separately, just to keep us moving. But thank you. I think we can address this. Okay. Any more on that? Nope. E001, sexual abuse prevention and education, first read, Ms. O'Neill.
okay. So this is a new mandated policy, even though we have a procedure about reporting sexual abuse. This policy focuses more on the education, teaching students how to protect themselves and what sexual abuse is, how they should go about reporting. So it's focused much more on educating the student as opposed to having adults report sexual abuse. And so that's the policy in a nutshell.
Ms. David.
I have a concern with the third paragraph that begins, "A student shall be excused." Is this something that is set by the state that we can't alter? I don't understand. I'm on the first page, the third block of text, "A student shall be excused from participating." Seems to contradict the purpose of the policy, so I'm just asking, it's fine if that's what the state requires us to say.
Yes, it does. Because there's a list of outs that is more than wrong. And that's a clause that has to be put in there. Yeah, good question.
Makes perfect sense. Any more on this? Okay. E009, preschool special education, first read, Ms. O'Neill.
So this is a mandated policy. It's something that we've been doing for quite a while.
And it has to do with a process of educating preschool students for reverse mainstream, where we bring non-disabled or typicals into the classroom to work and learn with students with special needs. The policy mandate directs the supervisor of special education to coordinate and evaluate the program annually and to make recommendations to the superintendent or to his or her designee. And then it authorizes the superintendent to to also to develop procedures for this program.
Ms. Kate?
I would so much appreciate another phrase at the end of the second paragraph that says, not only does the director coordinate and evaluate, but also ensures a successful transition to K-12 education. I think that's so vital, and if that component is missing, you can pretty much forget having done any of this.
I'm sorry, where are you?
I'm on the first page, second paragraph. No one ever knows where I am. I'm on the second paragraph, the last sentence. I would love to see in the language that you like, and to ensure a successful transition.
Yeah, and it's deleted in number 8. Like, I don't get why some of this stuff is crossed out. Because this is the K policy. So you're just crossing the K part out.
No, this was in our policy previously.
I thought this was new.
No. So why it's crossed out? When K writes their policies, they have a lot of procedures in them. And so we don't put procedures in our policies at this point in time. And so that's why it's crossed out.
So why do you just, like, don't even include it? Because it's brand spanking new. We would have never seen it.
Just, I don't think the transition is a procedure. I think it's a core value. I think it should belong in policy, so just take it into consideration.
I wasn't saying that it was a procedure.
No, I know. I know. Just think about it.
So you want to say, it's fine with me, and we'll see what the other people think the next reading. So when I bring it back, I'll have to assure successful transition to
kindergarten or to K-12 education or something.
Okay. Any other comments?
I think we need, just for purposes of posterity, so that people who come after us know exactly what we were talking about. I think in some of these areas, particularly like reverse mainstreaming as an example, it's not defined. There is a definition out there, I think I sent one out today that comes from the state of California. And I think we might want to add in a couple places some clarifying statements that just make these things more clear what they are. I'm fine with this policy as it is. I just think in some areas we might want to render it a little bit more explicit, so that when it says the board authorizes the superintendent to establish administrative practices and procedures which will fall to Mary Ford, that it's really clear what the board, what the intention of these things were, and there's no, it's clear. So, and I don't have a problem with what Ms. Dayton said, because Ms. Dayton said, see, I would have thought that was built in there. But no, I know, it's like, I shouldn't say that it's intended, but by you adding it, it renders it explicit, right? I have the same issue in some of these areas, and I don't want to make it some big elaborate thing. I don't want to add stuff, but to the degree that we can add definitions that clarify what we mean.
So one of the definitions you want is?
Like reverse mainstreaming as an example. It references it as central to the idea. I think it should explain in detail what does that mean, right?
What we can do in the procedure is just to put that right in there, the definition of mainstreaming.
Yeah,
reverse
I think what we're saying, we have an obligation as a policy so that, to write it down so that when you guys develop a procedure, we've made it clear. I think it's also helpful, this one caught my attention is a laundry list of statutes in this one. It's more than every one I've ever seen. How many of those there are, I don't dare start looking them up to see what they really say on this subject. But, and I think it's helpful that this thing came from a template from Cade, because that stuff's usually pretty well considered. But that's my ask, but maybe nobody else will support that too. Yeah, definition. But, you know, we'll have to see what everybody thinks once we do it. That's my feedback. Anybody else got feedback? Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Erickson.
I think I'm an outlier on this, and I sound like a broken record, but I am concerned that we're at the point where we're adding policies and we're making it confusing for ourselves and for our constituents. If it were me, I would have suggested revising E001, which we already have an area for alternative programs, which includes the preschool and defining preschool in that. We already have a policy that says we comply with all the laws. I think this is a little belt and suspenders. We could have done it within our existing structure. I think it's time that we really start thinking and aligning ourselves to CADE, because policy governance just has a huge job, and I don't know how they're ever going to catch up at this rate.
Maybe if the legislature goes home.
They're doing time on their hands.
Without getting into it, we're working on that.
Yeah, we're definitely working on it. It's just the way our policies are set up, that we don't have all our curriculum policies in one place, and we don't have all our sped policies in one place, and we don't have all our financial policies in one place. That's why it's so bizarre. So when you Google, and I know you do very often, you go into policies and you go, I don't know, wellness or something, it comes up under so many policies and then a half a dozen more procedures, so it's...
I'm where Ms. Erickson, is. I mean, I like this language. I'm fine with this language. If it's, I don't want to presume, you guys obviously thought about this, but if it makes more sense, I was making that point earlier, the less of these, so you go and you know how to look it up, until you guys figure out how to replace it. I mean, I wouldn't mind having this thing underneath. I would take all this, like, I could get behind taking all this language and sticking it in E001. I don't care where it lands.
We tried to do that with physical education and we made it confusing, so.
Okay,
I looked at like 5 different policies. Well, can we stick it here? Can we
retract my statement.
Where can we stick it?
We have a committee, this is what the committee does.
Just leave it until we come back with a big plan.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I should not have added any, that was like I got out the lighter fluid with the barbecue.
You've taken us to 11, you're taking us
Okay, preschool, we're done with that item. Any more on that item? And now, where are we?
Agenda plan.
Agenda plan! Okay. Ms. Eves.
Okay, let's see. I'll start with graduation requirements, which I think I'm hearing that we're going to be adding that back to the May 25th board meeting, possibly with a motion to
Yeah, just put it as a second read.
suspend. So we're going to present it as a second read and then you decide? Okay,
Yes.
got it.
Please. Actually, it's here, isn't it? I see it. Oh, I see it as first read. I'm sorry, it came up early. It's in our agenda plan, but it's now should read second read instead of
Yeah,
first
it
read.
just, because things changed when we added it back in tonight, right?
Okay.
Then I have that we are going, just going to go with the order of things I heard tonight, that the Windrose SEL course is a pilot course, so that'll fall into the pilot review schedule next year. So I'll make a notation of that for developing the report schedule for next year. And that the math pilot itself will be submitting a written report on school visits that are planned for May. And when is that going to be?
After May 30th sometime.
There's always
Dr. Porta?
But, I'm sorry, before you move off that, Kim, can we circle back? You jumped ahead a little bit there. Greenwich, monitoring report, Greenwich Alternative High School, we're gonna take that up for action next, at 5:25, the next meeting, right?
Yeah, I think the redesign program sort of took over the spot that was scheduled for a standard monitoring report for that. So yes, I guess technically it's coming back as sort of the monitoring report.
Yeah, right. Is that what everybody intended?
That's fine.
Okay, that's fine?
Yeah.
That's fine, okay.
Okay.
So we're gonna forego the MR, and it'll be, we will be taking action on, I think the cover sheet said, recommendations. So we have to take action on the recommendations, accepting the recommendations that are in the report.
It didn't happen.
Yeah, I forget what it said on the cover sheet. Okay. We're gonna need one, because the action we're taking is accepting the recommendations that are contained in that report. It's not a pilot. It's a redesign. There are components. There are components that are pilots, but this action is you're either saying yes or no to windrows. Now, if we're not ready to do that now, we could do something else. Okay, and this is where, you know, what do we want to do here?
They're trying to enroll students, identify and enroll students for
I
next
get that
fall,
part.
so I don't think we have
Well,
that much time.
yeah, I will tell you, I just want to say this again, and this is more because I know Dr. Gilday is going to watch this tape.
We're all going to zoom in, folks.
Jill, if you're listening, okay, we cannot get proposals with recommendations for things that have to be implemented in the next year 30 days beforehand. We have said this before in agenda planning. The administration cannot bring us things like that. If there's something like this as an example, I don't know how it happened, I don't care. This should have been before us back in January at the latest. This shouldn't have been coming this late. Because
It's up to us to say that. I've said that time and time again. It needs to be a year and a half cycle.
I agree.
And so we need to put that in place.
No, Barbara, I totally agree with that, but you have to understand, this was originally presented as a monitoring report. It turned into, without, I think.
I think it was supposed to be a special report. But we all knew last year.
Okay, I'm gonna make this simple. If somebody wants us to approve something that they want to get implemented in 30 days, I don't want to get into whether it was a monitor report. We cannot get stuff that comes to us where all of a sudden, oh my God, if you didn't, we can't admit students. We can't run the district
Then we need
like
a
that.
policy that says what we want to see happen.
Oh, fair enough.
I would push back on the year and a half. I think going back to sort of innovation and developing and thinking, I think that's a little too long, but I would go with give us at least a couple months, you know, 3 months would be nice.
The problem is, when they come, it's not really fleshed out as well as it should be. There's all these other pieces that they haven't.
Yeah.
So it seems to me, good long-range planning would require at least a full year for them to have researched it and come with an initial proposal, time for us to look at it, time for them to go back and patch it up, and then come back.
And Kim, I'm going to make you the meat in the middle of the sandwich because you are our agenda planner or you're our helper in planning agenda. When this stuff comes up and, you know, the administrators come banging and say, I really want to get this on the board agenda because I need a decision, we have to pay attention to this, and it's just helpful. We as a board have to do it. But if you could help us by also guiding and steering administrators that, hey, they're not going to be able to do that. Because nobody's interested in saying no, but we can't be put in this position on these things. Yeah, okay. Enough of that subject. I think message received. I would be looking at you, but you're going to be playing golf the next time we have to worry about this problem.
Can I just say it's almost May 12th?
I know, we're really gonna miss you. But you're still here for a while, so don't go anywhere. Okay, what else, Kim?
So then we're on the math pilot, back on math pilot.
Math pilot's in the parking lot. Well, wait a
What I
second.
heard was that you were going to be receiving a written report on the site visits that are being conducted in May. So I presume that written report is going to be submitted at one of the June meetings.
Either work session.
15th, I don't know if it's.
Oh, I didn't come away with we wanted it in a meeting. Did we want it in our meeting agenda schedule?
Well, it just
Well,
gets added to the end.
Fine, let's add it. If you could find a date, can you look at the schedule and,
I think it's gotta be June 15th.
okay, June 15th it is.
Because the site visits are at the end of the month, right?
Yes, June 15th it is. Okay?
And then.
Do you want just a written report of what we learned from the visits?
Yes.
Or did you want to have a conversation?
No, hold on. Let's do this. Prepare it as a written report. It'll go on the agenda as a written report. We'll get it a week beforehand, we'll read it. If one of the board members wants to have a discussion, then we can take that up. But let's plan it as a written report.
Understood. And then the next thing was that there would be, and I'm just putting this on the radar for 2017-2018, that there would be a pilot check-in just before getting ready to test or trial whatever you're going to be implementing in the classrooms. The assumption was after summer work is done, that would be a good time, so early-ish in the fall.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be right before, it needs to be when they're logically at that milestone. So if they come back and they say, hey, we need input from the board anyway, we want to do it, but the administrative team should figure that out. I think we would expect it to be, just off the top of our head, probably in the September, October timeframe, but that has to be decided by the administration.
Understood, and that's the placeholder.
According to Dr. Gilday.
I'll put down. Early fall.
But you gotta ask the team, the team's gonna figure that out.
Sorry, I forgot to go finish up the windrows, because I just wrote it on a different side of the piece of paper here.
Yes.
That we would have an update next year on that program as well, obviously.
I
That's
think
just,
that would be.
I think that necessarily, I don't know if that's necessarily when you're being updated on the pilot course at the same time, or that's a different.
I think that's a separate item.
Earlier check-in than that,
Right.
I don't know.
So I think the way it has to happen is, we need to put it on the list in the parking lot, we're gonna look at what reports we're gonna look at next year, right? That's the process that's going on, we're gonna settle that. So that's gotta come out in that process. Separately, I think there was an item for a pilot for a specific course.
Right.
Right? So that has to be dealt with as an individual item, however that's properly disposed of.
And then also for 2017-18, I have down that early in the year, we need to be revisiting graduation requirements for class of 2018, et cetera.
Well, that's gonna go into policy governance, so we'll wait for it to come out and they'll tell us when it's gonna come out. That will probably require a broader, by the way, just a heads up, I think that probably requires, I would encourage PGC to not take that on amongst 3 people. I think that requires, it's such a big topic, it's connected to a bigger thing, we need to find a way to effectively engage all 8 members of the board in that conversation before it even gets considered what to do. So, but Kim, that's gonna come out of policy governance when it's.
I just have it as a placeholder.
Placeholder in the parking lot.
And then I do have a request for a gift copy exemption discussion. So for Riverside School to redo their cafeteria.
Yeah, we're gonna have another one of those. I found out of another one of those today. There's gonna be another one that's coming out of the high school.
So I was gonna.
No, I'm sorry. They want to offer a gift that will exceed the $10,000 threshold, and it will not be done under the PTA or therefore it has to come as a gift item to us to be reviewed. If it's something after July 1, it doesn't require further review based upon the approval of the budget. If it comes before that, it will probably have to follow that procedure. I just want to give you a heads up. There's going to be an item and we have to figure out when to schedule it. It's an athletic item. It's a gift associated with Greenwich High School hockey. Okay, so, but they're going to, someone wants to formally give that to us, so we're going to have to take that item up. But it's coming.
Okay, and then good on the Riverside.
And they want to do it in time, I guess, for, well, hockey season, whenever that is. So I don't know if that means we'll have to take it up before June or it'll come in September. to be determined.
But then on the Riverside one, I'm proposing that it be, your first read is in the June meeting.
Sure.
And then vote at the June 15th meeting.
Is that, yes, yes. Is that when they need it?
It'll be for 17, 18. They like to do the work over the summer.
This summer.
It'll fall into the 17, 18 school year.
But that's fine, but, so we need to dispose of it to keep it on track. Okay. Or we need to take it up, I should say. Yeah, dispose of it. Anything else on the agenda? Anything, Ms. Erickson?
I'd like to add something to the May 25th agenda, and that would be on the proposed BOE charter change, just an up or down vote on the substance of the report that is on the website from the committee, the majority report. I went to the selecting meeting today, and there was a request, and it was noted that although BOE members have spoken individually, perhaps there is not a record vote, and the request was made just to do that.
I spoke, let me add to that. I spoke to the first selectman today to clarify what it was they were asking us to take up. They're sending us a letter, or a note telling us what they want us to take up. The item that they want us to take up is not that. The item that they're asking us to take up is in their meeting today. They asked us to take up, which is a question for us, and I'm glad they're asking us. They are commissioning their charter change committee, which they're going to add another member to because of Joan Caldwell's passing. They want us to take up the question that they're giving to that committee. There are two sections of the town charter, section 66 and section 67. They were originally going to ask only the charter committee to ask about section 66. They now, today, I guess on the recommendation of, or the ask of Drew Marzullo, to also look at section 67. Both of those sections relate to the process by which major parts of town government, their governance may be changed, and that they want us to, they're going to ask, should the Board of Education follow the same procedure or a similar procedure that's in place for the Board of Selectmen, the RTM, and the BET, and they want our feedback on looking at those two areas, and they want us to take it up and render an opinion that is input to them as they consider also the input that they're going to be getting from this committee, that this charter change committee, on that question. He did say to me, I said, did you also want us to take up the report you received? And his answer was, no, we're not asking you to do that because it's not before us. We have decided with that report to take no action on it, so it's not before them. So they're not asking us to take that up. They're asking us to take up this other item, and they're going to send us a clarifying note within the next few days. I'm looking at the schedule, and there's a set of legal questions that are going to have to go get investigated relating to that, the connection to state statutes and some other things. I think we should schedule this because the selectman is requesting it. We should take up the item that they're requesting. I'm not confident we're going to be ready to do that on the 25th with some of the research that's going to be required.
Respectfully, I mean, I was at the meeting, and there was some discussion about what was voted on, what was requested, but I do think it's appropriate that this board take a record vote for the recommendation, because what they're talking about now is not the substance, it's the process. The substance hasn't changed.
Absolutely, I second that. Every other body in town, every other major board, every other major body has to vote on the change of their own body, except the Board of Education.
That's the question they're sending.
That's exactly right. We're all on the same page. I think we should take a vote.
I agree with that. You know, Jennifer, I think you're saying the same thing. There are two sections, section 66 and 67, relate to this. Laura is talking about something entirely different.
I'm really not. They're very, very closely intertwined. And it is going to be the new committee, the reconstituted committee, that's going to look at section 66 and 67.
Right.
As
I'd like to take up the item.
as a prequel to their work. One of the selectmen did ask, can we have the Board of Ed on the record as to what their position is on the substance of the issue, which is not going to change, it's just the process has now changed. I think it is a good idea, I'm asking if you put on the agenda.
I'm in a different place. That is what one, you just said it, that's what one member asked, it wasn't what
I'm asking
the.
on behalf of the Board.
Laura,
Fair
do you
enough.
want to make a motion? And then we'll.
Fair enough, fair enough. I just was trying to provide clarification on what we're being asked to do.
Laura's made a motion.
For an up or down vote on the charter change, the substance of which is posted on the majority report on the town website.
And you said
Let's vote. So what are we voting for?
to put it on the agenda for discussion of the change.
No, what she's asking for is to put on the agenda the consideration of the report that came from the committee, the majority report, as well as the report written by, and you want to discuss the substance of that.
I think everyone is very well versed in the substance. I think it's a simple up or down vote at this point. Of course, there can be discussion, but it's just a record vote as to where this board stands on the substance. Again, the process.
So you want to have, here's the concern I have with that. If we're going to take that up, we need to take, it'd be appropriate to have, just as every other board has done, like the Board of Selectmen did. They had a meeting, they took in public comment, they heard from the public. This is...
It's at a public hearing. We're talking about it right now. We can publicize it as much as you'd like.
Okay, so you want to take it...
There's a motion on the table and I'm going to call the question.
Okay, fine. All those in favor of taking up this report and debating the substance of it and taking a vote and a position at our next meeting on 5/25, vote yes.
That's actually what you said. So
that is what she said.
Why don't you repeat your motion?
It's really an up or down vote on the substance of the report. So I don't disagree with Mr. Schur's characterization. I just don't think that it is, again, everyone, not everyone, but most people have opined as individuals, and it's just time for the board to take a record vote. That's all.
All right. All those in favor? All those against?
Abstaining?
Because I see a bunch of email going back and forth, so I'm trying to process.
Just be clear, okay. So we're gonna, at the next meeting, review the substance of that report, take a public hearing on it. If there is anybody who wants to comment on that thing, I think we're gonna fill our room, let's get ready. Okay, and then we're gonna take a vote, so that's what it means for the agenda. Okay? Finish. So you have to add that.
Got it.
That just, everybody prepare. That is going to be an incredibly long night. We have, just as a reminder, we have a...
I haven't said that yet.
Okay.
Do you have to do that next meeting? Is it important that we have to?
I do. I mean, this has been thoroughly vetted in the public, so people may choose to come as they always do. We will entertain public comment.
Only because I was going to ask to add an executive session before that meeting, so it's already going to be long.
We're gonna have
It's the end of the year.
We're gonna have an hour-long executive session, right? We're at a long evening on recognition. Now we've added this with everything else we have on our agenda.
A vote has been taken.
I know that. I'm just.
I'd like to add.
That's how we operate this board. When a vote is taken, it's not reconsidered. Let's move on.
I'd like to add discussion of an executive session for discussion of legal issues related to school start time. Before the 5/25 meeting.
Is it vitally important for you with that particular time to get it done on that date? I don't know the answer, you do.
I think we had hoped to have it today, so this was already a postponement, so I think it is important for us to move along.
And we're confirmed that the attorneys are available?
No, I wanted to make sure that we at least thought we could make, I will confirm.
No,
heard that right.
Well, we just had it today, I'm sorry. I guess what I was trying to do is see if people are available and give them a heads up.
No.
Haven't we already blocked out that time frame?
No, it's blocked out for a half an hour. She needs an hour. And it's, you know, we've said as practice, we're gonna take these times and have these things. She's just given us a heads up candidly. I told Gaetan today, schedule the meeting, and whoever can come, and whoever can't come, can't come.
It's a long meeting. Right.
It doesn't even require action. It's a mere notification. The committee is gonna call its meeting on that date. Okay. Okay. With that, anything else? Can I have a motion to adjourn?
You can't wait, you want a motion to accept the agenda tonight?
Yeah, motion to accept the agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
I want to be here.
All those against?
Aye.
I'm not accepting that agenda.
I move to adjourn.
I'm to adjourn.